Good evening. It's the 1st of February, 6 o'clock, and welcome to the the second of today's BCP Overview and Scrutiny Board meeting. I'm Councillor Steve Bartlett, and I welcome all the members and officers here this evening. A particular welcome to all the members of the public and any members of the press that may be watching. Before we hit the agenda, I'd just like to ask Democratic Services regarding the way this meeting will be conducted. Thank you, Claire.
Thank you, Chairman. Please note that this meeting of the Overview and Scrutiny Board is by the Council for live broadcast and will be published on the Council's website for a minimum of 6 months. In order to ensure the meeting is managed effectively, please could everyone present follow these ground rules for speaking. Only speak when invited to do so by the Chairman. Always turn on your video function when invited to speak. Please state your name before you speak if you have not been introduced by name. Please mute your microphone when you are not talking. If you would like to speak on an item, please do so by utilising the raise your hand feature in the bar at the top of the screen. The messaging bar should not be used unless you are raising a point of order or providing the wording for a motion. Please remember that this panel is visible to all and subject to public information requests. If at any point you would like to speak again, please use the raise your hand function again. If a vote is required on any item, the Democratic Services Officer will call out each board member's name, beginning with the Chairman and Vice Chairman. Please could you respond in this instance with for, against or abstain. Finally, please ensure background noise is kept to a minimum and mobile phones and other devices are switched off or switched to a silent setting for the duration of the meeting. Thank you, Chairman.
Do we have any apologies, Claire, please? Can't hear you.
Apologies. We've received apologies from Councillor Howe and Councillor Rice is substituting for him for this meeting. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you very much, Claire. Declarations of interest. Do any councillors have any disclosable pecuniary interests or any other local interests on any items on the agenda? It would appear not. Thank you. Agenda item 4, public issues. Are there any public issues, Claire?
There's been no public issue submitted for this meeting, Chairman.
Thank you very much. Agenda item 5, Cabinet Member Report. And this is being presented this evening by Councillor Mike Anderson, who's the portfolio holder for Transport, Cleaning and Waste. So welcome to you, Mark. We're looking forward to hearing from you. Just to let everybody know, members of the public, this is the second in a series of portfolio item presentations, basically, where we're trying to find out what the portfolio holders' main activities are at the moment, what's in the future for us, just so we can sort of get ahead of the policies that are coming our way, which will eventually find their way through to scrutiny as cabinet decisions or council decisions. Mark, thank you very much for coming this evening, and no doubt you've probably got some members of your team with you as well. So I would ask you to come forward and introduce your paper. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Steve. Thank you for inviting me to discuss the environment cleansing and waste portfolio with you today. It's possibly the largest in breadth and areas covered, and it really can be said that the environment covers your whole life from cradle to grave. We collect your rubbish, provide space for your enjoyment, and finally help your relatives to lay you to rest. The portfolio can be split into several different areas, and I'd like to say a little bit about each area. Additionally, as I'm also doing some work on water quality, I will say a few words on this, but more on that in a minute. I will concentrate my remarks on the 4 broad areas: seafront, flood and coastal risk management, FSM, environment, which also covers cleansing and waste, and finally upon up and country parks and what I do within these different directorates. Water quality. First area I would like to discuss with you is one that seems most topical at the moment. That of water quality and the effect on our harbours, rivers and sea, and the effect of nitrate runoff, stormwater overflows, as well as the permitted discharge of treated effluent from the various sewage works in the area. We are not the regulatory authority for this, and we can only monitor, However, to keep up the pressure and represent the council's concerns, we've arranged regular meetings consisting of myself, senior officers, Wessex Water, Environment Agency, and other parties such as CFAS, which is the Centre for Environment, Fisheries and Aquaculture Science, on how we reduce these stormwater overflows, and have also been actively lobbying MPs to support Philip Dunn's Sewage and Waters Bill 2019-21, and all our local MPs seem to be supportive in this. We are in contact with DEFRA and MHCLG over their storm overflows task force and how we can widen the engagement of this task force with local councils. As some of you may know, we have an innovative artificial intelligence water quality sensing project for Poole Harbour, which is being delivered by AI specialists at Unif AI Technology through a partnership between the council and Poole Harbour commissioners. It represents the first live deployment of a network of low-cost, remote and continuous sensors, which use AI to monitor in real time the health of a protected water ecosystem, such as Poole Harbour anywhere in the world. This is a 2-year project, so the team are currently working on training the AI to ensure that the data is robust, and the sensors have been deployed measuring 4 parameters: temperature, electrical conductivity, pH, and oxidation reduction potential. And the AI consumes this data and extrapolates it to predict a number of parameters, including nitrates, nitrites, phosphates, salinity, and hopefully we'll soon be adding E. coli. The AI is based on 80 million historic data sets. And the AI we're using for this is the trained neural network with deep learning. Once the training is complete, I'll be having discussions with the team to see how the data can be made more publicly available. As a result of the publicity for this AI system, we're also having talks with local landowners to see if a similar system can be introduced into Christchurch Harbour. Please accept my apologies. When going through the service plan for environment with Mr. Austin, we noticed that some of the service plan timelines, which link with government publications, are now incorrect or yet to be defined, and we're still waiting for the Environment Bill publication and amended waste plan. This directorate involves a lot of cross-cutting and collaboration work between the various portfolio holders. I've attached the environmental service plan to the report, so rather than bore you by going through the information we provided, I thought I'd talk about some of the projects that are current and clarify some of the bullet points in the report. First one I'd like to talk about is Saltwood Crescent meadows in Millie. We've been having consultation with residents on the open space between the houses in this area. During the coronavirus lockdown of 2020, a lack of grounds maintenance staff capacity across the BCP Council meant that areas of previously mown grassland were left unmanaged. Saltwood Crescent was one of these areas where grassy meadows developed due to a lack of maintenance. Residents are split on whether to maintain the meadows or return to the previous mowing regime, and we're in the process of consulting with them on that. Bournemouth Green Waste Bin Replacement Scheme. We just started week 3 of this programme, and after a few teething problems, the programme is on schedule and proceeding to timescale. We had issues with residents' concerns about when to leave bins out, etc., but releasing the schedule detailing area and dates for replacement seems to have sorted this out. Cleaning and gully cleansing in Christchurch needed a gully cleaner and road pavement cleansing equipment, as there was none available from Dorset County Council. This required the transfer of equipment from Poole to start the work. Equipment was ordered, and this is now in place, releasing the Poole equipment back to Poole. Beta sluice gates used to flush out Poole Park saltwater lagoon. This is a project again picked up from Poole and involves the replacement of time-expired sluice system and culvert. Very much in the initial stages of this, I've had some discussion with staff of the scope and options available, and intend to visit the site later this month to view it and get a better understanding of the situation and how it fits into the larger scheme. I'd like to also clarify and expand on some of the bullet points in my report. A quick play. This refers to playgrounds, my responsibility, and outdoor gym equipment, Councillor Angus. I'd like to just make a comment on commercial waste, and that we've had a drop in income in this area due to COVID lockdowns, and we're hoping to see hoping it will recover, but we're waiting to see how this happens. Region highway maintenance, this covers repairs and making good the highways, but it also covers signs and lines. The Highways Capital Scheme is a new build that we do for growth and infrastructure. An example of this is the scheme at Boundary Road Roundabout by the university. Now, I've also thought about areas that you and as a panel might like to get involved in. First of this is a public toilet review. I feel it's important that we get a good understanding of councillors and residents' views on this. And when I carried out a similar process in Bournemouth several years ago, we had none of the issues that plagued Bournemouth. I'd also be interested in having some work done on street signs, etc., and scoping this work. I'd like to talk about the seafront now and the areas that I'm involved in, which are seafront cleansing, toilets, cliff management, and dirty environment hub. To try and put it into perspective, 6.5 million visitors a year to our beaches, which stretch from Highcliffe to Hamworthy, via the Bournemouth seafront and the piers, not forgetting sandbanks. During the bathing season, May to September, beaches and the promenades are cleaned daily by a mixture of tractors and hand-litter picking in areas where the tractors can't reach, typically the zigzag footpaths. The total seafront waste removed is approximately 2,000 tonnes per year from the BCP seafront, and around 400 tonnes of this is litter picked directly from the beach, either by the beach tractors or by hand litter picking. Seafront Services also takes 300,000 tonnes or more of sand off the prom every year, and I've had an extra tractor added to the budget to help them cope with this. We have over 28 public toilets in the combined seafront, that is across Poole, Bournemouth and Muddy Sandbank, which are maintained and cleaned by BCP's in-house team, which is supplemented by seasonal staff. Additionally, there are 10 sites in Christchurch and Highcliffe, as well as Motherford Quay and Friars Cliff that are cleaned by Churchill. The sites at Avon Beach and the Cliffhanger Cafe, Highcliffe, are managed by the businesses on the site. In the latest 2019 survey on the toilets, the level of satisfaction from each user was around 92%. Cliff management is done in conjunction with staff from Parks and Countryside team. You may have seen the recent press release about the goats and moving them along the cliff. This is a legacy Bournemouth agreement with Natural England to improve the biodiversity of the cliff fauna and fauna. The agreement sees a stewardship fund being paid by Natural England to BCP to enable delivery on the plan. The Dirty Environmental Hub. The hub will establish a new visitor attraction and facility from which to drive education around the coastal environment issues and improve public recycling, and will include new toilets to replace the existing ones. FSUM. As mentioned in my report, we're in the process of creating a single FSUM group, Dorset Council, which will allow more efficiency through building in-house expertise. Examples of this are beach replenishment surveying work, which will now be carried out in-house, £7,000, as we have the expertise in-house. We've just purchased 2 drones for survey work in areas where access is difficult. One is equipped with LiDAR, light detection and ranging, to accurately monitor the example management of employees of climbers, saving money, carrying out frequent inspections. They can also be used to survey highways. Also through FSM, I'm a member of SCOPAC, Standing Conference on Problems Associated with the Coastline. We recently commissioned BCP staff to carry out work on sea level rise. I'm also a member of the Environment Agency's Wessex Regional Flood and Coastal Committee, and this committee provides local levy funds for schemes across Wessex. FSM have a website, https://poolbay.net, which lists all existing and potentially future schemes, including the current 7.5 million beach replenishment scheme that will see 350,000 metres cubed of sand and beach material added to the beach between Southbourne and Sandbanks. It's also responsible for the groin replacement programme that restarted in October last year. Whilst the website lists all the projects that are there, I would also like to briefly mention Hengstbury Head Longgroin, which is a keystone in the local area construction coast protection scheme. Without Longgroin, beach material would rapidly wash away and the cliffs would start to erode again within a year. The Poole Bridge to Hunger Hill scheme, a bid for 12.5 million flood defence grant and aid scheme, has been approved, and we are awaiting confirmatory letters from the Environment Agency. The Christchurch Beach Replenishment Scheme is scheduled to start after Easter, and the Environment Agency have now approved the Christchurch Bay Management Scheme proposal, in its output tender. Once in place, this will allow BCP to apply for Environment Agency funding rather than it being a capital expenditure as it was under Christchurch Borough Council. Upton Country Park is the only formally accredited country park within the BCP area. With around 650,000 visitors each year, it's one of the most popular in the UK. Upton Country Park is a 108-hectare country estate located in the edge of Poole Harbour to the western boundary of Poole. The estate is owned and managed by BCP Council and includes a 200-year Grade 2 style listed Georgian-style mansion house and a diverse range of habitats which border an internationally recognised shoreline. The estate includes formal award-winning gardens, parkland and woodland, and tenanted agricultural land. 30 acres of a sustainable alternative natural green space are also provided. This is the knocking regeneration programmes in the council. UCP won a coveted Destinations Award, Attraction in the Year, in 2020 and benefits from many other accolades and accreditations, including Green Flag Awards, Green Heritage Site, and TripAdvisor's Traveller's Choice. The impact of COVID has highlighted the importance of providing quality outdoor leisure environment, and over the next 2 years, a 1.9 million National Lottery Heritage Fund will be invested in the Discovery Project at Upton Country Park to help celebrate and improve the heritage qualities we have there. The Discovery Project vision is to celebrate the heritage of Upton Country Park by restoring, conserving, and interpreting historical features and landscapes to create a more accessible, sustainable, and vibrant attraction that will engage new and existing audiences. Key objectives are to improve our facilities for visitors, restore historical features, provide new opportunities for those living and visiting the area, improve and develop our engagement with existing and new audiences, and extend awareness of Upton Country Park as a valuable, accessible heritage attraction. Finally, I would like to go through and answer the questions you've submitted. I would also like to provide some answers to the tree management questions that were also submitted. I think they will help give a broad view on this aspect of the work. And finally,
sorry, Councillor Anderson, can I just butt in a moment?
Yeah, sure.
I should have made some clarification on that. The issues around trees and highways, of which you put in, which was circulated late this afternoon. What I'd like you to do is just not to go through those and instead focus on the questions that have been asked, which were specific to the environmental overview and scrutiny meeting. And we'll be discussing the trees and highways issues a bit later on when we talk about the forward plan and how we want to approach those particular areas, if that's all right with you.
That's fine. I would like, however, to talk about a couple of the items in the highways, just because I think they're quite relevant to the panel, and they explain some of the work is done by my portfolio. So I'm happy to leave the trees and most of the highway stuff, and I'll go into the questions now if you like.
Yeah.
Would you like me to read the questions or?
Yes, thank you. That would be very helpful if you would. Thank you.
I'm not going to read the whole questions because some of them have a question and then quite a large piece of narrative. So if I give you the number and the first part of the question, then you can follow me in that.
Perhaps you could, it might be helpful as well if at the end of the answers that you've given to those specific questions, if you could just give an opportunity for members to come back on that specific question if they want to, if you wouldn't mind.
Yeah. I'm quite happy to give them questions one by one.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, right. The first question I've had was, we understand that a response team is to be established to street cleansing problems. And then there's a fair amount of narrative on that, which I won't waste your time on. The answer is no. There's no planned formation of a response team. Additional resource has been approved to help increase general standards, whilst a fundamental cleansing review is undertaken and its findings are reported to Council. BCP Council is now responsible for cleaning 628 miles of road and associated footpaths and 6,200 hectares of open space. Since the formation of BCP, Council officers have spent some time to learn more about legacy Council service standards. It is evident that there are currently differing levels of both service provision and resourcing methodologies adopted and recorded performance data in relationship to cleansing across the 3 towns. This has been recognised as a corporate priority requiring a fundamental service review. Officers are currently in the process of a 12-month data gathering and analysis project to help inform an options report to be considered by full council in December 2021. The data gathering will be undertaken in accordance with standards for grading set out in the Code of Practice for Litter and Refuse. Investment in new onboard sweeper grading recording technology, sweeper tracking data, and via electronic mobile inspection databases will be utilised by cleansing operatives and highway inspection officers to collate local environmental quality data. Once collated, this data, alongside gathered industry best practice, will be used to evaluate available resources and highlight gaps in the service provision, resourcing to produce options on evidence-based mechanised sweeper frequency programs and manual sweeper support resource based on land type, demand, and an area's ability for such land to be maintained, to maintain standards between each visit and ensure parity of service across the conurbation. Cleansing roads frequently covered, filled with parked cars to clear detritus, mainly leaf fall, which affects large areas of our leaf conurbation, remains a challenge for all local authorities, with no industry quick wins. BCP Council does not have the powers to take cars away that do not support the request for no parking to facilitate cleansing visits, and previously trialled notices to residents in other locations have produced very limited results. Leaf and blossom fall are only regarded as detritus once they have substantially lost their structure and become mushy or fragmented. The review will seek to identify any alternatives to tackling the issue against the funding challenges the authority faces. The review will furthermore consider existing litter bins provision and the need to increase numbers where it's physically suitable for a bin to be safely accommodated without adversely impacting footpath width and or different types of receptacles, including using subterranean bins. So, are there any questions on that, Chairman?
Yeah, do any members wish to take up any further points in that answer, or have any further questions on that? I've got one I could ask now, if you wouldn't mind, where we've had issues with bins on the street being damaged or whatever. I found that the answer is not to replace them, but to take them away. And you're talking here about potentially putting extra bins in, but there doesn't seem to be a willingness at the moment. The tendency is to actually reduce the numbers of bins. Could you just comment on that? I don't want to be a specific, talk about specifics, but just in general, is it likely that we'll be reducing the number of bins on the streets or increasing them?
The big problem is, Steve, sorry, Chairman, is we don't actually know where all the bins are. One of the jobs we've got to do is actually make sure we have identified where all the bins are and how many we've got. Once we've done that, we can then look at whether we need to move bins or add bins. So at the moment, we're not replacing them just until we sorted it out. Okay.
Councillor Vikki Slade, you've got your hand up.
I have, in specific response to that. It wasn't my question, but I'm very confused that we don't know where the bins are. I can see one of our other councillors looked equally confused by that comment, because surely they're collected on a schedule, so we must know where they are. I know in Poole a few years ago there was a review of bins, and it resulted in a 30% reduction in the number of bins, which caused a lot of upset by residents. So I'd be really interested to see whether the plan is, as Councillor Bartlett said, whether you're looking to increase them so that they're closer to people, or whether they're looking to decrease them, because I believe they cost about £300 a year in emptying costs. But my question is around the cleansing schedule around detritus. Some parts of the conurbation have, obviously pine needles as opposed to broadleaf, which behaves quite differently in terms of the way it clogs up the roads. Has any consideration been given to the times of day and days of the week that we do our cleansing operations? Because the complaints I get are around, well, if you were to do more cleansing at the weekends, you're going to find, some of these spaces that are busy during the week are then empty. And I just wondered whether that was part of the review, as well as what we're doing. It's about when we do it. Thank you.
Chairman, if I may, I think I'd like Mr. Broadstone to come in and answer that. This is much more of an operational comment.
Yeah, good evening, Mr. Austin. Would you like to come in?
I can do, Chair. Yeah, I'll do my best to come in and answer a couple of those issues. In terms of the litter bins, just going back to the litter bin issue, Councillor Slade is correct to a point. We do broadly know where the litter bins are because they are on a cleansing schedule, but we now, certainly across BCP, I think we have in excess of over 3,200 litter bins, dog waste bins, some legacy recycling bins that are still in situ. And I think it's a case now of, as we say, as part of the fundamental review, assessing the frequency of emptying, but also the type and number of bins, because I think there's some areas where I think it is right. You could possibly reduce bins in some areas to declutter areas. And I know that has happened in the past around certain schemes. And there are other areas of the borough where I think you would need additional bins, or if possible, as Councillor Anderson referred to, even look at the installation of subterranean bins and this type of thing. So it is quite a fundamental piece of work that will take a little bit of time to work through. In terms of the cleansing frequencies, absolutely. And I think we are blessed across BCP with having many tree-lined avenues. A lot of those are pine trees, a lot of them other tree types, which does then present us, when I say us, the environment team, with an ongoing challenge. And we do try to actually look at our cleansing frequencies. We obviously monitor the weather very closely, and certainly with the prevalence of storms that we have been seeing over recent winters, as our climate is changing. Essentially, the problem can be you can get through, you can clean the streets, you get a storm come through, it looks like you've never been there for weeks and weeks and weeks. It is a real challenge. And in terms of working at different times of the day and that sort of thing, obviously, to a point, our teams are contracted for certain times, but we will do our utmost to work with the teams and, if necessary, with the unions to adapt cleansing schedules and frequencies, and also, where possible, try to get parked cars removed, etc., to do a comprehensive clean. And often in that scenario, because it takes a bit of planning, we'll try and do a lot of other works as well, sort of repaint the lines, obviously clean the gullies, any pothole repairs at the same time while the street is empty. But it does take a lot more planning.
Thank you.
Thank you, Larry.
Thank you. We've got Councillor Neil wants to come in. I've just got a question first, just to follow up on that. One of the, as a ward councillor, one of the complaints that I get frequently is our road hasn't been cleaned for years. Never seen a sweep around here, etc., etc. Now, I'm aware that the main roads clearly have a cleaning schedule, but you know, it's a bit of a mystery to me whether the sort of back street, the residential streets backing off and away from the main roads, actually are subject to a cleaning schedule. Now, I think it's sort of implicit in this question that's been asked, and I don't know who's asked it, but it suggests he who shouts loud gets a response. Now, from my own experience, I do know that whenever I've cleaned up and requested a street clean, it's done, and they're very efficient. They come in, no problems, and it's done. But that because there isn't for all the other roads outside of the main roads? Is it on a case by case where somebody is complaining that it will get done, and is it that we do need to actually using the data that you're going to be collecting over the next few months? The aim is to actually come up with a schedule for all streets in the conurbation. Would I be right in saying that?
If I'll come back on that. We do have a schedule. There are legacy schedules in place from legacy Christchurch, which that was easy because there wasn't that much of a schedule in Christchurch. It was reactive only. We have legacy Bournemouth, we have legacy Poole schedules. Now, hand on heart, I can't say they are correct because obviously we are looking at this fundamental review. All I can say at the moment, we're also always have a degree of flexibility within those schedules because of, as I've just talked about, because of storms, because of impact of visitor numbers. All of that sort of activity can mean that we do need to adapt our cleansing resource where possible. We will do our best to maintain our cleansing schedules, but equally, if we do recognise or it's picked up that there is a response needed, we will try to sort of adapt and undertake that piece of work as necessary. And in terms of whether people have actually seen sweepers and that sort of thing, we do have, for example, some of our main roads, they're being swept at sort of 4 or 5 o'clock in the morning, and then at other times it's like 9, 10 o'clock in the evening, depending on our workforce. So quite often people wouldn't necessarily see a sweeper at that particular time. But we do have the schedules, we do have records, but as we've just alluded to, it needs a fundamental review because we're not convinced that it is totally what is required to keep all of the standards of BCP as we'd want them.
Thank you very much, Mr. Austin. Councillor O'Neill.
Chairman. Yeah, it's really related to what you've just said and to Larry, that it does seem, and I'm talking Penn Hill ward now, where we have a lot of trees, as you know, and it does seem that the public at large in Penn Hill allow things to build up over a period of time in the hope or expectation that there might be a cleansing routine, and it then reaches a stage where they start to shout. Some of them you will know because there are certain ladies that do chase the system, and indeed some of the ward councillors. And one thing I don't understand is why can't street cleansing in these sort of back roads be tied in with the bin collection that is regular? You know, whatever the cycle, and then people have an expectation of when it's going to arrive, and they can probably live with that. The other thing is that the emptying of the bins, which is a regular occurrence, where there are problems, why can't we give the staff that empty the bins the wherewithal so that they can report issues that they note as they go round? Thank you.
Councillor Anderson, you don't want to take that, or do you want to?
I have some ideas and thoughts on it, but I think it's probably more of an operational item. So I think Mr. Austin can probably answer it better.
Thank you, Mr. Austin.
No worries. A couple of questions there. Certainly in terms of the bin emptying and the street cleansing, they are very, very different animals, if you like. The actual bin emptying, it's obviously every week, alternate collections, recycling, and your rubbish collections. Those teams that empty the bins, you are looking per team in excess of 1,200 bins per day. In terms of getting through the borough, you're looking at sort of covering, that's round about 15 kilometres a day for each crew. So they are moving through by their very nature very, very quickly to get the amount of bins emptied that we require of them, because we have, over the years, we have squeezed, and we try to get these teams as efficient as possible, and they are absolutely brilliant at what they do. I think to then ask them to try and record street cleanliness and any other particular issues, these guys, they don't stop. You know, we've stopped any sort of task and finish work, but they do really crack on. I don't know whether you've seen these guys. They're almost walking stroke jogging as they go round their rounds, and they take pride in that, in getting round their rounds, you know, as quickly, as efficiently as possible. And I think it would be a real hindrance if we tried to inject any other activities into their working day. They are absolutely flat out.
The driver who sits in the cab couldn't note those things as they go down the street?
The driver could do an element. I get your point with the driver, but we do have in-cab technology on some of the vehicles, and this is another legacy issue that we've got to work through, where some of the vehicles have an in-cab technology and others don't. So then you're relying on writing things down and everything else. In fairness to the driver, he is the responsible person when it comes to health and safety of his crew, and that's health and safety for his crew and for members of the public and other road users. And unfortunately, we do have, you know, near misses with other road users. Not everybody as patient as we would hope when the bin lorry's going down the street, and we do have instances where other motorists, etc., can get a little bit impatient. And it's one of those things, we do so much training with these guys and so much training with the drivers that their emphasis is very much on keeping that as a really safe operation. And again, it's just that distraction from that primary function, if you like. Okay,
and the phasing of the collections so that people know it's going to arrive. Sorry, the phasing of cleansing.
The phasing of the cleansing, I think that has to come out in this cleansing review we are undertaking. Certainly, as I sort of mentioned earlier, in terms of those tree-lined roads, we do have a schedule. We will get round that schedule, but it is labour intensive. The autumn season, there isn't a quiet season for our teams, but the autumn season is a really heavy season. And then if you start throwing in, if we get some early frosts and everything else, and you've got all your winter gritting activities, it is a busy time of the year.
Okay, I understand the problems.
Thank you, Councillor Neil. Could you just come through the chair if you want to carry on, please?
Yeah, sorry, Chair. I understand the problems. I'm more interested in what the potential solutions are, and I think Councillor Anderson said he had some ideas.
Chairman.
Councillor Anderson, would you like to come in?
Chairman. There are some good points that have been come out of some of the work that's already been done. I have some ideas. I'm not sure that now is the right time to come out with them because it's very, very early in the work we're doing on the scheme. I've been talking to Mr. Ross and I've been talking to Kate Langdon about this. There are some good ideas that have come out from the good ideas that have come out from the work that was done in Poole, and there's some good ideas that have come out of Bournemouth. I think one of the main things that I would suggest is that I would like to see the work brought in-house rather than maintaining contract work as we have in contractors and contracts let as we have in various parts of BCP. But I'd rather wait until we've got further down the line with the review.
Yeah.
Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. Just before we go, I've got Councillor Millie, Earl, and then Councillor Borthwick, then Councillor Mike Cox lined up to speak on this. Just before we go on, Councillor Anderson, just to touch on it, I understand that you're going to have an all-member seminar on your portfolio at some point. Have you yet determined when you're going to be doing that?
I've tried to organise 3 on the quality of water in the harbours, which I believe is for the 4th of May. We're also looking, I think, around about the 11th of March was an initial date, sometimes just after that for the highways one. And we're also looking at a green infrastructure seminar as well. I'm afraid I don't have dates for those.
Yeah, no, okay, thank you, because it does relate to our ONS forward plan and when we might otherwise be able to, you know, encompass it with some of your activities, that's all. Thank you. So, Councillor Millie, Earl.
Thank you very much, Chair. Sorry, I was just reading something there. So I have a question really, which is about air quality and environmental issues around that. So I'm particularly worried, not just in my ward, but also across the wider area about air quality. Obviously, this year and COVID has probably had a bit of a different impact. However, it's still been a major issue, particularly with 2 AQMAs in Poole. So last month, there was a landmark ruling that a 9-year-old girl called Ella Kissy Deborah died as a result of air pollution, or one of the causes of death was air pollution. This is the first death to have been listed in the UK with a cause of air pollution. I'm sure we'll probably see many more deaths across the country, and they really do reflect the inequalities where we've got dense population and main traffic routes, and the cumulative effect on health particularly for those who are more vulnerable, such as children and older people and people with respiratory diseases. I'm sure you'll agree it's a huge public health concern, and our government really isn't acting quick enough on it. But on a local level, in Poole, we have the 2 AQMAs, one on Ashley Road and one in Commercial Road in Ashley Cross. And I've literally just been sent the 2020 Air Quality Annual Status Report for Poole, which is what I've been digging around for recently. And so I look forward to reading that. But in the 2019 report, it showed that there were still high levels of nitrous dioxide at both sites, and there was some intent to monitor those. I just wanted to find out if there's work being done within your portfolio to look at air quality management, and whether ward councillors of those AQMA areas could perhaps be involved in that, if not the wider council population. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Before I ask Councillor Anderson to answer that, I'd just like to point out that we are still going through the list of questions that have been submitted, and we'd only got on to question 1. So if we could just park the answer to Millie's question until we've just worked our way through those, that would be great. Very, very eloquently put question, I have to say, Councillor Earl, but not quite in the right place. But
sorry, so I do apologise. I have been trying to find out where we were in the list of questions, and yeah, sorry for throwing us off course.
So we're still on question 1, and I believe that Councillor Borthwick, you wanted to speak on it. Thank you.
Chairman, I can answer Councillor Earl's question very quickly. Unfortunately, it doesn't come under me. It comes under environmental health in communities.
Okay.
So I don't have an answer to that because it's not my portfolio, I'm afraid.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Borthwick.
I'm out of order here because there are 3 new things. I want the portfolio just to look at tactile drop curbs around the area with so many mobility scooters. Sorry,
Councillor Borthwick. Can we just come back to that? If it's a different thing that's out of order, can we just get through the questions that Councillor Anderson's got in front of him already?
Oh, all right, okay. We'll get him later, right? Okay.
Then we'll come back to it later. Yes, thank you very much.
Okay, cheers.
Okay, Councillor Cox.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mine was really a follow-on from what Larry Austin was saying about the bin men. Because certainly the quality of bin collection in the Christchurch area where I live is significantly reduced compared to what it used to be with Dorset. You know, there seems to be a lot of waste detritus left over after they've gone. So I would very much welcome if somebody came along and cleared up after them, frankly. You know, I appreciate that they're on a hell of a tight schedule, and maybe that's the problem, is that they're on too tight a schedule. And maybe we should be more careful about the quality of the bin collection rather than the quantity of the bin collection. That was the point I wanted to make. Thank you.
Councillor Anderson.
Chairman, I think this might be a conversation that Councillor Cox has outside this meeting with myself and Larry Austin, so we can talk about the specific areas, because it's not something that has been raised with me before. I'm quite happy to talk to Mr. Cox about specific issues in this area, but I think it may be specific to his area. So I'm very happy to talk to you, Councillor Cox, and discuss it. But I don't think it's a wider area concern.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Anderson. I see Councillor Cox has put his thumb up, so I guess he's agreed to that. Yeah. So do you want to carry on then? I think, please. Councillor Anderson.
Okay, certainly, Chairman.
Yeah.
The second question I've had is I'd like to ask about street bins and why we have so many different types and the extra work this causes by needing different collection vehicles. And I will cite the East Overcliff as a classic example. Well, BCP Council provides in excess of 3,200 public litter, dog waste and recycling bins, which are emptied on varying frequencies. These bins have been purchased by legacy councils over many years and in the form of numerous sizes, styles and useful conditions. The cleansing review will include the production of a council litter bin strategy aligned with WRAP, which is the Waste and Resources Action Programme. The right bin in the right place guidance to English local authorities and business improvement districts on the design, number and location of public litter bins and other items of street furniture designed to capture litter. This guidance sets out a recommended approach to the provision of litter disposal infrastructure, bin infrastructure. Good bin infrastructure is a key element of the litter strategy for England as part of the strategic approach, which incorporates education and awareness raising, campaigns, signage, and is supported by proportionate enforcement where appropriate. And I think, Chairman, we have sort of covered some of this in the previous questioning.
Okay, thank you. Has any members got anything? Councillor Kelsey?
Thank you, Chairman. Yeah, thank you, Councillor Anderson, for your answer. It was me that put that question in, and my reasoning for doing so was along the seafront, for example, on the cliff top, there are 3 different types of bins, each which requires a different vehicle to empty them. And it just seems to me that it would be easier if we had one style where one collection could be done at a time. So I appreciate your answer on that. And Chairman, if I may, going back to what Mr. Austin was saying previously about street cleaning, street collections, bins and everything, can I please commend Pete from Southcote Road, who, whenever I have called him to come and pick up rubbish that I have collected from around the wall or where I've seen fly tipping, it's normally done before I finish speaking to him on the phone. He's been incredibly helpful for myself and my residents when we go out and do our litter picks, and I cannot commend the man any stronger for the work he's done, particularly in my ward, Eastcliff and Springbourne. He's been absolutely amazing for my residents. So if you can pass that on, Larry, I'd really appreciate that. Thank you.
Okay, that's great. Thank you. Before we move on, could I just ask Democratic Services just to confirm which of the chair's chat lines they're using, because I seem to have 2 open at the moment. So if there's no more questions, Councillor Mike Cox, I see you've still got your hand up. Is that a historic one? Yeah, okay, thank you. Carry on, Councillor Anderson, please.
Thank you, Chairman. I would, before I go on to the next question, I would reiterate and support the comments from Councillor Kelsey about, but not just about Pete Gallagher at Southcote Depot, it's about all the staff. I think all the refuse team do a very good job, all of them from down from Kate Langdown and Stuart Best and all through the teams. There was also a press release that was put out recently about the abuse our refuse teams are getting. And I just can't believe that members of the public are stooping so low that they're abusing the guys that are working so hard. So I would ask all of you to support us in reporting anything that you see or hear on that. So after that, I'll go on to the third question, Chairman. Since the landslide at Eastcliff Lift in April 2016, that section of the beach has been without permanent toilets. For 2 years, there were toilets in a porta cabin, and last year, nothing, despite a huge number of visitors on the beach. Will there be access to public toilets this year, either as a permanent site or in a porta cabin? The section of the beach also suffers from being used as a dumping ground. This is unsightly and has been going on for too long. The old building and the vehicles need to be removed, and the section returns to forming part of the lovely Eastcliff section of seafront. To answer that, the area below Eastcliff Lift is a safe zone, kept clear of the public in case of future potential cliff slips. The cliff is monitored regularly, but the redevelopment of the area is part of our seafront strategy, and for the moment there are no plans for a short term or at least work on the site. Temporary toilets have been installed for the summer of 2018 and 2019 to the east of the compound, but the impact of COVID and BCP budgets meant that toilets were not brought into site in 2020. The location is currently being used as a temporary depot for our beach cleansing team, who have moved out of the depot at Dirty Chine, where the site has been redeveloped into an environmental hub. Then the last bit of the answer I actually want to change, because I've been having discussions with Mr. Saunders about this, and I can confirm that we will be bringing in a toilet block, temporary toilet block this summer for that area.
Thank you, Councillor Anderson. Councillor Edwards, please.
Thank you, Councillor Anderson. That was my question, and I'm so pleased that you're going to bring in the public toilets because they are very much needed down on that section of beach. So thank you for changing the last bit of the answer to that.
Yeah, thank you. Before I ask Councillor Slade, I'd also have a question on this area. This area of storage seems to have got bigger and bigger and bigger. It's now over 500 metres long. I know it is because I paced it out personally. It also encroaches right onto the sort of the curbed part. And what you see down there now is the opposite of what we would hope to have happened from our emergency road things, which was aimed at separating cyclists and people and all the rest of it. Now we've got pinch points along that 500 metres where cyclists and pedestrians walking along the promenade are all squeezed in together. It really isn't very satisfactory. It looks really unattractive, and it's got bigger and bigger and bigger. You know, one would say, can you give me any idea of how long it's going to be like that? Is it going to stay like that for another couple of years, or, you know, it would be most unsatisfactory to have it like that throughout the summer. It looks most unattractive.
Chairman, I have a meeting which I've arranged with Mr. Saunders, who covers Seafront, to discuss that amongst other issues tomorrow. I have sent him an email earlier today saying that I was concerned about the compound along there and the width of the compound on the promenade. So I can't give you an answer now, but I'm happy to give you a response after I've had a meeting with Mr. Saunders tomorrow.
Thank you very much. Councillor Vikki Slade.
Thank you, Councillor Anderson. I feel your pain. I spent the whole of last summer trying to do exactly the same thing, and I just don't understand why it's so difficult to get an outcome. So this won't be the first time he's heard it, so hopefully you'll get a better response. On the same topic, I wonder if you can have more success than I did with actually making these compounds look less ugly. We finally had one of them, I think it's, I'm not sure if it's alum chine or durley chine, one of them down there has now been boarded to look better. And I really cannot understand, and you know, that's why I'm going to bang this drum again, and I can see Councillor Kelsey nodding, so I think we're in agreement, that we should put murals on these things. We should use children or local artists or graffiti. We don't need to pay. We can get this stuff done out of season. And then if we do need to hide these spaces, we should be making them look attractive so people know why they're hidden. The excuse I was given last year was that they're being monitored and we need to see behind what's going on. And I understand that, but I don't accept it. So if you need any moral support on that, you know, I'm putting it out there. Let's make these places look attractive while we're working on them. Yes, let's celebrate our history, our culture, our buckets and spades, whatever, and just make them look great. But we don't need to spend council money on it. There will be kids groups and environmental groups and businesses and all sorts that will do this for us. So, you know, please get a campaign going to make these places look attractive.
Thank you, Councillor Slade. Did you want to come back on that, or are you just happy to sort of taken in what's you've just been told?
Chairman, I thank Councillor Slade for her moral support. I may have to call on it. I have actually been talking to, as I said, I have a meeting tomorrow with Mr. Saunders, and the two items I've actually asked him about were a couple of others, but those are two items. I sent him an email and said I wanted to talk about putting boards on the fence panels that surround the compound. And I've also said I want to talk about reducing the width of the compounds. So I had thought about murals. I will ask him about murals as well.
Thank you, Councillor. Unfortunately, you don't get off that lightly, because I think Councillor Edwards wants to come back at you. Thank you.
I'm not coming back personally at Mark, no. I just wanted to say, yes, Vikki, was the recipient of a few emails from me last year about the same subject. So yes, and last year it was mainly the bins that were there, which she did get moved. So thank you for that, Vikki. But obviously the problems got bigger this year, and I'm hoping that, yes, our visitors will not have to put up with that really, really unsightly mess that's down there. So that I won't be saying any more about it unless hopefully I won't be coming back to this next year saying that there's still a mess down there. So thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Kelsey.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, Councillor Slade, it's my ward and I'm fed up with seeing it as well. It does cheese me off that we haven't done that. We did manage to get the train shed painted many years ago. That was amazing, from becoming a horrible grey blob to quite a comedy style mural on the side of that, which I thought was brilliant. I am aware that the second of the compounds that is down there now is only temporary whilst the new building is built along, I think it's at Joseph Steps where the previous depot was. So I do know that hopefully all that will return there at some stage. So hopefully we'll get rid of that. But I see no reason why we can't have boarded fencing around that rather than just that mesh netting type, so that people don't have to see through there. And if Councillor Anderson needs any comments from the ward councillors in his trial to get that, I'm sure myself and my two ward colleagues will be only happy to come and beat his door and get him to do that. Thank you, Councillor Anderson.
Thank you very much. Councillor Edwards, is your hand a historic hand? Yes, it's gone. Okay, well, having dealt with the easy one then, Councillor Anderson, perhaps you'd like to move on to parking enforcement.
Chairman, the parking enforcement isn't within my portfolio. I believe an answer has been sent to the person who asked the question by Democratic Services outside the meeting.
Okay, thank you. Do you want to carry on with the others?
Certainly, Chairman.
Thank you.
Question 5 says, due to more people being at home, have our teams had to deal with much more household waste than normal? And has this affected the budget? Teams are doing a great job in this difficult time. There has been an increase in household waste collected at the curbside, both recycling and residual rubbish. 4,000 tonnes more was collected April to December compared to the same period last year, an increase of 5%. Financially, this additional waste is projected to cost an extra £494,000 for the year. This pressure is in the disposal budget and has been mitigated by the unit costs being lower than budgeted due to the anticipated refuse-derived fuel tax not yet being implemented, and the recycling disposal prices having been more favourable than previously forecast.
Thank you for that. Do members have any other questions for that subject? I believe that question was asked by Councillor Beasley. Councillor Kelsey?
Yeah, Chairman, it's just a quickie on that particular subject. As we have had more people obviously staying at home and more household weight, fully appreciate that that's going to have increased. But equally on that, surely we've had a drop in business waste, takeaway waste, bin emptying from around the town where there's no nighttime economy. So is that actually balanced?
Chairman, I don't know. I'd like to ask Mr. Austin if he could come in and answer that, because I don't have the sort of figures.
Is that okay to come in, Chair?
Yes, please do.
Yes, certainly. In terms of balancing it out, that's probably too broad a term in terms of does one offset the other. Certainly the increase of household waste has proven to be a lot more due to the different working patterns. So consequently, the teams are picking up more waste at home. I guess the double whammy, if you like, in terms of our operation is that the commercial waste, businesses have changed in terms of their operation through COVID. Some have continued to work, some have worked differently, some unfortunately have not worked at all. So we have seen a drop in tonnage I haven't got those figures to hand, but our commercial waste tonnage is nowhere near the domestic waste tonnage. You know, it represents a much smaller percentage of the actual total waste collected. But yeah, we've had an impact on commercial waste as well, certainly.
Thank you. Councillor Vikki Slade.
Just very quickly, I don't know if you saw the really interesting article about cardboard that was on the news yesterday, that there is a national shortage in cardboard, and that there is now a demand for companies trying to access cardboard from local authorities and companies for recycling. And I wondered whether we had been able to take advantage of this in actually finding a market for some of our recycling through cardboard.
Mr. Austin, would you like to come back?
Councillor Anderson.
I think I see if Mr. Austin can answer this, as it's much more of an operational comment.
Thanks, Councillor. Thank you. No worries. I must admit, I didn't see the article. I didn't spot that, but I can understand that being the case, given the amount of home deliveries, etc., that has been underway since COVID. It's not so much operational; it's actually contractual. All of our recycling is contracted through existing waste contracts. So yes, the more cardboard that we collect, that will go into the stream, as it were, into the recycling stream, and then depending on the markets, that sort of helps set, if you like, that bar that we pay for our recyclable material. So if the actual cardboard market gets a lift, that will help our finances as such, but it has to go through the contracts we have in place, and we're tied to those.
Thank you. Just to correct something I said just now, members, I said that Councillor Beasley had asked question 5. Actually, it was Councillor Edwards. The next 2 questions have been asked by Councillor Beasley. So, Councillor Anderson.
Thank you, Chairman. Question 6 says, could the Cabinet member update the board on the plans and progress for the commercialisation of waste collection from non-domestic properties in order to improve the Council's revenue account? BCP Council have existing legacy commercial waste services which incorporate refuse and recycling collections. Bournemouth, 1,500 refuse recycling bin customers. Christchurch, 200 refuse recycling bin customers. Hull, 1,200 refuse recycling bin customers. Garden waste service, which it goes to 51,793 properties. Roll-off, roll-on containers. Bulky waste. Skip and grab bag service, which is currently only operated in Poole. Van permits across BCP Council conurbation, although this isn't income generating, and bin deliveries, which is again not income generating. The commercial waste income generation we have is that approximately 2.4 million across Bournemouth, Christchurch and Poole for garden waste. And commercial waste, we have 2.1 million in Poole and 1.8 million in Bournemouth. There's a team of 6.6 full-time equivalent officers that deliver these services. Investment and back office consolidation is required for business to progress further. There's no consistency across the legacy Bournemouth Poole team members regarding the systems. There are different legacy logins, impacting on the ability to print and access certain software, financial packages, customer databases, and garden waste systems, such as legacy team and such. Each legacy team is currently working independently. Work has started to obtain a new commercial waste customer database. Now that's the answer. I'd like to add something also, because I've been involved in several meetings on the commercial waste system and improving it. And I've had a look, and I've been very impressed by the work the officers are doing on bringing this in. They have my support, and I will be supporting them to make sure that the scheme we bring in will come in as soon as possible. I could bore you by telling you all about the alloy system and how it works and everything else, but I suspect that's my sad interest rather than everyone else's.
Thank you, Councillor Anderson. Councillor Kelsey, your hand is still up. I'm not sure if it's from a previous question. Yeah, it's gone down now then.
Chairman, you keep cutting out. I didn't hear any of that last part.
Okay. Would you like to carry on? Did you hear that?
So, I did. Thank you, Chairman. Thank you. Right, the last question I've got here is further, could you give an indication of the volumes of recyclable materials from non-domestic properties which could be collected commercially by the council, which are currently going into residual waste streams, where such an option is not available from private sector waste collectors? It's difficult to quantify this waste. Recycling services provided commercially through BCP Council, and the private sector waste collection contractors do operate in our accommodation. We have been awaiting the government waste plan 2021, and this paper was launched. These indicators were that there would be a greater onus on business to recycle both dry recyclables and food waste where appropriate. This appears to be the case in the document. I have got a link which is in the answer. I can read it out, Chairman, but it's in the papers, and it is quite a long link.
Okay, thank you. Members, would anybody else like to come in on this one? No, it would appear not, in which case we've got to the end of those specific questions. Have you finished what you were going to say in terms of your presentation?
I would, if I may, Chairman, I'd like to say a few words on highways, just because I think it's more, they are of interest to members and they may help in some of your deliberations later. If you'd rather I didn't, I'm more than happy not to.
No, that's fine. Councillor Borthwick, I haven't forgotten about you. So I'll come to you after we've got past this little piece here. Okay, thank you. All right, carry on, Councillor.
Okay, just give me a second to find my notes on this. But basically, I wanted to talk about the highways and how we measure highways, because I think if I can tell you how we do it, it might help in people understanding some of the issues that residents have raised in the past. So I thought I would tell you a little bit about the maintenance function and how we actually measure.
Wonder where your daddy is, eh?
The roads. And we have an inspection process that's carried out over various different types of roads. So I'm going to read some bits out here because I think it's important that I get them accurate here. And this is the Condition Assessment of Structural Maintenance Programme. And this is a collection, condition information collected annual programme of surveys that is used as the basis for assessing the condition of individual roads in order to determine a priority listing in the Council's structural maintenance programme. And basically, there are three types of survey that are carried out. Scanner, this is a survey carried out using a special vehicle that measures the condition of the highway surface, recording the texture, profile, and cracking. This survey is undertaken on classified networks, i.e. A, B, and C roads. Scrim. This is a machine-based survey which measures the skid resistance of the road surface. All A and B roads are surveyed. The final one is MRM. The survey records the same details as a scanner survey, but with the exception of cracking defects. This is mounted on a smaller vehicle so as to be more suitable for unclassified roads. And 25% of all roads, all unclassified roads, are surveyed each year in the conurbation. And then these surveys give a condition index, and we have a program that prioritises them. I just thought that would be quite useful for people to know on how highways maintenance is carried out. And the other part I just thought it would be quite useful to tell people about is we've had quite a lot of complaints and comments from residents about when road surface dressings have been applied. And I thought I would just, again, read some information out that explains what the different types of road surfacing that are applied. And I'm just going to read out some information about three of them. The others I think everyone knows about. So surface dressing involves the even spray application of an emulsion bituminous binder through a purpose-built spray tanker onto existing road surface, followed immediately by an even application of aggregate chippings to dress the binder. Surface dressings offer many advantages. Seals the road against ingress of water, which is, as we know, one of the major causes of asphalt deterioration. Arrests the deterioration of the road surface and underlying road pavement structure. Restores the necessary level of skid resistance to the road surface with the resultant benefits of reduction in skid-related traffic accidents. Timely intervention will enable worn-out road surfaces to last longer, thereby increasing the time to when structural maintenance is required. Can help to reduce spray caused by vehicles travelling on wet road surfaces. Maximise the cost effectiveness of limited highway maintenance funds, and can be used on all classes of road from unclassified to national speed limit motorways. In the middle of the three we've got is micro asphalt and slurry surfacing. I think this is the one that we've had more complaints about. These materials are cold applied, thin bituminous surface courses, incorporating bitumen emulsion and fine grade agricult with fillers. These materials can be used to restore the surface condition on roads, footways, cycleways, car parks, playgrounds, central reservations, traffic islands, and amenity areas. Slurry surfacing is a single coat up to 6 millimeters thick. Micro asphalt incorporates a polymer modified binder and is a 2-coat application laid mechanically or manually to a maximum thickness of 50 millimeter. Micro asphalt offers many advantages: rapid curing characteristics, high daily output means less traffic distribution, restores surface texture and improves skid resistance, impervious membrane prevents water ingress into the pavement structure, seals and preserves existing surfaces, suitable for overlay on a wide range of existing surfaces. Microsurfacing has the ability to reshape and reprofile existing surfaces. And the final one is asphalt preservation, a protection emulsion applied to surfaces to seal them and help prevent potholes. It's used on roads showing early deterioration as a cost-effective early intervention, as they cannot improve the road surface or reshape profile. I'll leave it at that. I have more information on it, but I just thought that it may be quite useful for members to understand a little bit about highways and what's happening with them. Thank you, Chairman.
Yeah. Thank you, Councillor Anderson. Okay, Councillor Borthwick.
You've got me, Chairman, yes?
Yes, please. You have some issues you wanted to raise with Councillor Anderson?
Yeah, and these are the three where I don't want you to rush out the door and do them tonight, right? But it's just something I think ought to be tactile drop curbs. There's a 200 waiting lists for these curbs we've done, but the money is very restricted on getting them done. But with the increased numbers of mobile scooters, I think we've got to try and do a little bit about it. And the other one is the new scooter is going to be used around the town, and as we see the Echo today, they're going to be moved down the beach or down the promenade, which is a very unpopular place with residents and cyclists. And if these people are going to be whizzing around at 15 miles an hour, it's another hazard. So when that subject comes along, Mark, and get Larry, could you make sure that we get an input that they're not welcome on the beach and along the thing at 15 miles an hour? And the last one is the extra sewage, which is now being about, because we're building more and more new buildings. That's another very important thing we've got to think about, that how do we get rid of the sewage waste at the end of the day? So there were just three things I asked you to put on board and make sure that we have an input. Okay, Chair, I'm quite happy with that. Really. Yeah. I don't think it needs a reply. They've all nodded their heads.
Well, they're all very substantial issues, actually. Maybe we can have just a quick response from Councillor Anderson on them, and maybe Mr. Austin might like to say a few words on it as well. But certainly they are fairly significant items.
Okay, Chairman, I will deal with the second two, and I'll leave Mr. Austin to deal with the drop curb one, if I may. The scooters are not in my portfolio. They come under transport under Councillor Mike Green. And he is coordinating that. So unfortunately, there's nothing I can do about it. I suggest you contact Councillor Green and discuss that with him. On the subject of the sewage.
Sorry, Mark. It's the use of the scooters on the promenade, which I might say comes under your portfolio. Can't escape.
It doesn't, I'm afraid, Councillor Borthwick. The sewage, Chairman, I'm quite happy to talk about this. The problem we have is that it's not a regulatory task for us as a council, so we can't actually enforce issues with the sewage discharge from the sewage works and from the runoff of nitrates from groundwater and various other things. We could, under planning, I suppose, ask for more permeable road surfaces and other things like that. But what I'm trying to do on that area is I have, as asked at the last council meeting, I wrote to all the MPs in the area asking them to support Philip Dunn's bill on sewage work. It's sewage work. It's I can't remember the exact title, but it's the Inland Waterways bill, and where he's trying there to improve the water quality by a reduction in sewage discharges into waters. The other areas that we can do is we can look at trying to force Wessex Water and the other sewage companies to introduce attenuation tanks rather than having storm drain that go out into the sea. We are having meetings with, as I've mentioned earlier, with the Environment Agency and Wessex Water, and we've written to MHCLG and DEFRA about our concerns, particularly about the effluent being discharged into Poole and Christchurch harbours, and also into the River Stour, because we have the Holderness sewage works there. So, yes, we are looking into it. Yes, we are trying to put pressure on the Environment Agency and Wessex Water. Yes, we are having some success, but we can only ask, plead, cajole. We can't enforce. And I think we're having an effect. I think MHCLG have recognised that there are issues. I certainly, Wessex Water have recognised there are issues and problems, and we are talking about attenuation tanks, etc. There is no perfect solution on this one, I'm afraid, but we're trying to do something. The other issue that I did raise earlier about the AI and Poole Harbour is going to be very useful in the long term, because what it means is that we will be able to get a live feed on where the pollution stream is coming from. So if we suddenly see a spike in E. coli, we know where that's come from, where it's coming from, and we can chase that back down. But that at the moment is probably about a year and a half away. And as I mentioned, as soon as we get to the end of the trial and the training program, I will be looking at making the data more publicly available. And I think I should also thank Councillor Hadley for raising several of these issues with me, along with Councillor Miles. And I've looked into this, and I quite frankly, I agree with some of their comments. But we are pushing it, and I'm trying to get some reaction from government on it. And I don't know if Mr. Oscar would like to say something about the drop curbs.
Mr. Austin?
Yes, certainly, Chair. I'll keep it fair. In terms of tactile paving, tactile curbs, those crossings, essentially any programme of installation is overseen by Growth and Infrastructure as part of the overall capital programme. So could I suggest it might be worth just an email through to the Director of Growth and Infrastructure in terms of what's in the programme. Once these are installed anywhere across BCP and they go past the maintenance period, then the environment in-house highway maintenance team will maintain them. But in terms of, as you say, talking about Council of Water, any new installations, that was down to officers in Growth and Infrastructure.
Thank you, Mr. Austin. There's no one else putting their hand up on this issue, but I would just like to mention a couple of things here. Bournemouth Council previously used to have a flood committee, and I did ask when we had the Shadow Authority if we could introduce it, because the issues around flooding and sewage discharge and all of those fairly significant issues are constantly being raised by members, and it seems to me that we don't have the kind of knowledge and transparency that we used to have when dealing with these issues, particularly the ability to influence the Environmental Agency and Wessex Water, who were members of that committee, and where we routinely met with them to discuss all these and tracked all these major issues. So we could take our concerns through to Cabinet and Council through the reports that we used to produce. And it was a very, very useful forum for dealing with these issues. Now, I'm not asking you directly now, Mark, but could I just ask you to think about that to see if it might be something you would be interested in re-establishing. Councillor Edwards, did you want to speak?
Well, I was going to raise the same subject actually, because as you know, you and I were on the flood advisory group, and having our council engineers, the Environment Agency, the water boards, and meeting every 3 months or so was we could bring these sorts of subjects to them, and I think we really need to reinstate such a committee as that.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Felicity Rice.
Chairman, can I just quickly come back on that?
Yes, of course.
First of all, I'd like to explain that we have a new structure when it comes to flooding. Flooding now. We have the Flooding and Coastal Erosion Risk Management Panel, and that panel has regular meetings. I think it's every 3 or 4 months, which are open meetings for all councillors to attend, where they can raise questions and have a conversation with the officers about directions they want to put. Because we have a combined FSM meeting, group with Dorset, we now have, I think it's excess of about 40 members of staff involved in that team. And that means we've got a lot more experience, and we can start to pull in officers with expertise. I intimated that in my speech about the LiDAR drone and the in-house surveying teams. But also the other part of that, I'm afraid, is that it's not an issue that I can actually do. I can't actually raise a new committee. It's a recommendation that you could make to ONS suggesting that we did it. And if that's the route you'd like to go, I'm more than happy to support you on it. But it may be worth looking at the work that's been done with FSM. We had quite a good attendance at the last FSM meeting, and that might be a place that you can raise issues. The other thing that is we found with FSM and the meeting is, because it's a private meeting without the public being involved, you tend to get a better answer.
Okay, thank you. It was a couple of interesting issues which I won't go into at the moment, but I think it's important that we are seen to be, and public meetings are a good forum for allowing the public to say and hear what we're actually doing about these very important issues as well. But I would just, and I will certainly consider what you've said. I understand you haven't got the authority. I just wanted to understand if you were interested, and you are interested, you've said so. So we'll give that some thought and see how we might be able to take that forward. Councillor Rice, please.
Thank you. Can I just check with you, Chair? Is it? I've got 4 questions, a variety of things. Is now? Are we asking general questions now? Is that correct? Yeah, great.
Yes, we are. Yeah.
Okay, wonderful. Okay, so first question is, what does Councillor Mark Anderson think about the 400 cars passing through Poole Park in the afternoon rush hour, which normally occurs if the ETRO at Whitecliffe at the Keyhole Bridge is not present? The second question is with regards to increasing grass meadow patches. So this is regarding thin strips next to pavements or edges around playing fields. When I was portfolio holder, the grass cutting team were really keen to map out digitally every single patch of grass that the teams have to cut, so that as we move forward with reducing the amount of grass that we routinely cut, given the climate and ecological emergency, we could start to calculate the surface area that has a reduced carbon footprint, for example, due to less cutting. We could start to calculate the biodiversity improvement because of leaving the grass to grow. And potentially down the line, we could also work out a carbon sequestration value from these areas that are allocated to reduce grass cutting. So it was just really to see whether the portfolio holder was supportive of that sort of principle. The next question was from section 6, which is regarding surface water flooding. So it was really in low-lying suburban areas. There are significant issues with groundwater levels. The study that's going to be done, will it include looking at improved general drainage for such low-lying areas? And also, what is the timescale for this piece of work? Also, Mark Anderson spoke about in October about using unrecyclable plastic waste in resurfacing of roads. I have serious concerns about this because it devalues plastic, discourages the use of recyclable plastic, and discourages reuse of plastic, and crucially introduces an uncontrolled source of microplastic into the environment. Can Councillor Anderson update us on what has happened with these discussions? And then finally, a councillor in a Greenpeace meeting back in October, November time stated that electric vehicles will resolve air pollution issues in the future. However, this is factually incorrect given the increased particulate matter released by electric vehicles due to their weight. And actually they release more particulate matter than current fossil fuel powered vehicles. So perhaps since the councillor responsible for communities is not present, as Councillor Anderson clarified, then maybe the strategic director for communities could confirm that they are aware of this serious source of particulate matter and it will be considered. Thank you. I'm going to copy and paste those questions into the chat.
Thank you, Councillor Rice. That's actually 5 questions, not 4. Councillor Anderson, can you answer those?
Thank you, Chairman. The answer to the first one is relatively simple. When I went to my first meeting about Poole Park and the whether to include through traffic or not, the question was asked of the 4 councillors that were in attendance from the 2 wards that cover Poole Park, whether they supported the status quo of returning to through traffic or not. And as 3 of them said they were, I was happy to support their decision. And I'm quite happy to continue to support that decision that they made at that meeting. The second question about the grass meadows, I think this actually comes under our biodiversity and green infrastructure papers that are coming out. So I don't want to commit to anything on this until we're further down this route on looking at these papers. The surface water flooding, I don't know the timescale. I haven't asked about the timescales. I know it's going to happen. I know we're going to be looking at the whole of the area, and I've already asked the team about low-lying flooding areas, one area in particular in Creekmore, and they are going to be looking into that. So I assume that it will also cover all those areas as well. Plastics, you've got it slightly wrong on the plastics. What I was talking about was using those plastic materials to create a bituminous type material, not using them in the raw state. So it would actually be using them in manufacturing. And I suspect it would be those plastics that are currently very difficult for reuse and finding a recycling route so that we use them rather than, say, using them in residual fuel derived elements, etc. And finally, the question about electric vehicles. I think that's a question for the Cabinet Member for Transport, not for me. So I wouldn't like to commit on that one.
Thank you, Councillor Anderson.
I noticed, Chairman, that Councillor, Mrs. Ryan is indicating to speak, so I don't know if she'd.
Oh, is she? I'm sorry, I didn't see that. Sorry, Mrs. Ryan.
Oh, it's okay. I just thought Councillor Rice had suggested, seeing as the portfolio holder wasn't in place, perhaps I could answer the question, which I don't know the full answer. I mean, I think there's you know, clearly there is still emissions produced by electric vehicles. I'll need to, you know, take the detail of that back to the team. I know that there's research that clearly shows electric vehicles, you know, do decrease the emissions and impact on the environment, but there's a debate about to what degree. So yes, we're aware of that fact, and we'll have to feed that in terms of the overall assessment of carbon in our plans to get to zero carbon in the conurbation.
Thank you. Councillor Rice, did you want to come back on any of that?
Yes, thank you for that information. I will try and provide some more information about the difference between electric vehicles and non-electric vehicles then in terms of pollution. Yeah, I suppose it was really interesting to just hear from Councillor Anderson about Poole Park, because obviously the Bournemouth parks have been closed to through traffic, and from a strategic portfolio point of view, sort of considering children's safety in a park, and just what parks are meant to be as spaces to be at rather than to travel through, is I was wondering whether I was looking more for a sort of a personal opinion from Councillor Anderson about his view on what parks should really feel like. But
I don't know if you want to come back on that. Would you like to give a personal perspective on it? Although I suspect it'd be very much the answer you've given, but let me see if you wish to answer the question.
Chairman, my personal view is that I should listen to the ward councillors, and I will listen to the ward councillors around all issues. I'm listening to the ward councillors about the Sopwith Crescent in Millie for their views on what they'd like to see us do up there, and if any other similar issues arrive in your wards, I will do the same. That's what the ward councillors would like, so I am happy to support them.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Rice. We've now got Councillor Chris Rigby, followed by Councillor Vikki Slade. Councillor Rigby.
Thanks, Chair. I've got two questions for you, Councillor Anderson. I'll do them both at the same time. One, you might tell me it's not in your portfolio, but I'll try my luck with it. The first one is around fly tipping. Since the tips closed at the start of the COVID pandemic, there was a massive increase that we saw then in fly tipping going on in various wards across the conurbation. However, since they've opened back up, there's not really been a decrease in it. In fact, your ward in particular, Queen's Park, I've had reports this year alone, there's been over 100 bags of waste dumped at various occasions. And I mean, full credit to the environment team who go out and collect these, because every time it's been reported, every time I've reported something, it tends to get picked up the same day, or if not the following day. But have you got anything which you're looking to put in place to target fly tipping, particularly when it's occurring in the same places around the same times on a regular basis, be that weekly or monthly? The second question, while you've got it as your background, is around the beach and cleansing on the beach. When we come out of lockdown, it's going to be approaching sort of spring, Easter time, and obviously we're going to once again get a big influx of tourists coming to the area. Holidays abroad is going to be limited again, and personally I think we're going to have a very, very similar situation to we did last summer, where we've got a lot of crowding on the beach, we've got a lot of waste being left, we've got people potentially camping and setting that up. Are we putting plans in place now to be able to tackle that? I'm going to say if and when it does occur, but when it does happen. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Anderson.
Thank you, Chairman. The answer to the first one is quite simple. I've been working with Kelly Ansell and her team, and with Councillor May Haynes on setting up a fly tipping policy. We're looking at trying to get a pilot study where we will start to introduce fixed penalty notices on anyone that is caught fly tipping. We're doing a lot of work on it. The paper is almost ready to be released, So I've kept quiet on it at the moment because I want to make sure that we get the paper correct and the process correct before I go into further detail. So please excuse me if I don't give you any more information on that, but we are doing work on it. I'm very much aware of fly tipping issues, and it has been one of my priorities to try and get it sorted. So if you can accept that, Councillor Rigby. Beach cleansing is something that we are concerned about. Like you, we are concerned about what is going to happen and the increase in visitors as we start to open the beach. One of the things we put in the budget is for an extra refuse vehicle to be leased this year to travel along the seafront. This is a 12-ton vehicle rather than the larger refuse freighters that we had problems with last year. The idea is so that it can maneuver along the beach, selected parts of the beach, at more easily and not have to move so many pedestrians out of the way. In a longer term, I am looking at introducing underground bin storage so that we can have in the hotspots have larger capacity bins so that we collect more rubbish and we have the greater capacity so they won't have to empty the bins every day. We can empty them at a better time that suits the people on the beach rather than having to go and empty them because they're full. I hope that answers your questions.
Yeah, that's fine for now. I look forward to seeing that fly tipping paper come up on the forward plan and having a look at it. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Slade?
Just Chairman, Councillor Austin.
Yeah, I see Mr. Austin has got his hand up. Yes.
Thank you, Chair. It was just to slightly expand on Councillor Anderson's second point around planning and Councillor Rigby's second question about planning for this summer. It's probably just to reassure you that officers, if you like, behind the scenes are working through some really detailed plans around, as you say, the expected influx of visitors from Easter onwards. Councillor Anderson mentioned about the freighter. That's one aspect, but we're looking at all other sort of aspects around additional security, additional cleansing, not only our beaches but our open spaces. So it's ambitious, but we are trying to put all of these measures in place, and we'll take that through the necessary decision making of the council to get that move forward.
Thanks, Larry.
Thank you. Councillor Slade?
Thank you very much. Councillor Anderson, I've got a few questions on different issues, so you might want to write these down. The first one, I was looking at your portfolio, and one of the things which I see is in your portfolio is a provision of SANG. And following the decline of the Hicks Farm SANG, I wondered if you could update us on your view around how we are going to resolve this problem if we are going to achieve 15,000 homes, which is in Councillor Mellor's big plan. In particular, I wondered if you could share your thoughts, because I know you were very involved in it last year and it's your ward, about the option of part of Queen's Park being rewilded, potentially decommissioning the golf, and whether we've got an answer yet from, I don't know if it's Natural England or MHCLG, on whether rewilding of an existing park is considered an appropriate means of creating a SANG. If it's not, what other site you'd been looking at, because I'm really worried we're going to run out of time with potentially planning applications that might expire before we've even had a chance to get this through. Second issue I've got, am I right in thinking that you said air pollution isn't you, it's Councillor Green? Okay, I'll can that one then, we'll save some time, we'll wait till it's his turn. Carbon budgets, I think I saw was in your portfolio. No, I thought I saw it on the list. Okay, no worries. And finally then, play parks, which is in your budget, in your area. Yes, okay. I'm extremely worried about how we properly deal with the provision of play when play park improvement seems to only now be being funded through neighbourhood SIL. Obviously, Christchurch had a huge amount set aside before they came over from Dorset. I know last year we had lots of money we allocated in Bournemouth, but we've got areas of parks that have had no investment for 10 years or more, no or very limited SIL collection because of limited development, and particularly older children are really poorly provided for in some parts of town, and there doesn't seem to be any other strategic means of dealing with informal play and play equipment. I just wondered if I could have your thoughts on that. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor.
Thank you, Chairman. If I can quickly come on to the SANG, I know that Councillor Broadhead is having a meeting about this tomorrow and has got a plan on this, so I don't really want to steal his thunder, so I will leave that for him to cover and come up with. Item 2, the decommissioning of the golf course and wilding. Now, the problem with that and conversations I've had with the residents is people like the golf course as it is, with the open spaces and clearance and everything else, the cafe, and the feeling is that if we decommission the golf, we will lose that revenue. If we lose that revenue, we won't be able to keep the maintenance up in the park as it is. So I'm afraid, I'm sorry, but when it comes to Queen's Park, I'm not in favour of wilding, and I'm not sure who said I was, because I've never have been. I'm in favour of keeping golf at the park. Then the final bit about play parks. One of the things that we're doing at the moment is we've got the Future Parks programme, Parks Accelerator, and we are looking as part of the Parks Accelerator at Walkman Park in Christchurch, Winter Recreation and Alexander Park in Poole as part of the Parks Accelerator, where we are aiming to bring these 3 parks up to standard where they can maintain and introduce revenue into themselves, so they become revenue neutral, so they support the maintenance of themselves. The future parks and the Parks Foundation are items that have been set up. It used to be the Bournemouth Parks Foundation. It's now changed its name to the Parks Foundation, and we are using that to raise funds to pay for the development of play parks, play areas, etc. And these are all areas that will be coming up in strategy papers that are coming forward.
Can I just come back and just get some clarification with that very briefly?
Yes, sure.
You reference those 3 parks, which is great if you live in that part of town, but if you live in Hamworthy or Broadstone or Creekmore, that's of no interest to us at all. Are you suggesting that the future park, the Parks Foundation, with the Future Parks Accelerator money, is going to eventually cover all of our parks or only the strategic parks? Because it's the neighbourhood play where children can go out on their bike or walking or stop on the way home from school that is lacking. Our strategic parks are brilliant, and I think we've done a fantastic job over the years, and our green flags demonstrate that. I'm just more worried about the neighbourhood play.
The view is to include the neighbourhood play and to build them up as well. I've seen documents about that, which I fully support.
Thank you. I think we've got one hand that's just gone up. Derek Borthwick. Councillor Borthwick.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Yes, I'd like to just enhance the portfolio holders' views on Queen's Park. Now, Queen's Park, golf and exercise go well together, particularly when you think it's a big park. And I know that the ladies out there in particular who are walking their dogs or walking are twice as happy to have somebody else around. Otherwise, I go up there today, for instance, and there's hardly anybody up there. But it makes it a very unsafe area, and with the amount of trees up there, you'll have people camping up there, which they do now. And the course, after many years, really making money now, and the cafe was really turned into something really successful, and the game was beginning to make real money. This is a real good raise for money playing golf, and you couldn't maintain the course and the ground and not lose money. You have to have an income, and it's not cheap. It's £700 for a season ticket, so you're not giving it away. And it's great for mental health. If you haven't, been able to take a lot of exercise, mental health and everything comes in. Obviously, you're a non-sportsman by nodding your head. You don't understand that the enjoyment and the health-free place Queen's Park is. And I've been up there for the last 18 years, and I can tell you, I feel better for it. So don't put your eyes in the air, love. It's a mental issue. If you can't appreciate that, I'll give you no hope.
Thank you, Councillor Borthwick. I'm not sure that needs a reply. I think it's just a statement of support for the golf course on Queen's Park. I think we've just come to there's no more hands up at the moment, but just before we move on, there's a couple of things I'd just like to raise with you, please, Councillor Anderson, in terms of, and you don't have to answer all this at the moment, but what I would like you to do, if possible, is give some consideration to any areas of the environmental portfolio that you hold that you may think are useful in terms of putting to ONS to help you with any policy development. You awake at nights in terms of risk and really hot issues that you may have at the moment. And finally, are there any really big opportunities that you can develop within your portfolio? Now, there's some fairly meaty questions there, and I wouldn't expect you to answer off the top of my head unless there is something horrible going on that you'd like to tell us about that is a big risk, but hopefully there won't be. So with that, if you're happy to just sort of take that away, if you want to reply, that's fine as well. But otherwise, I think we've probably come to the end of this session. And I have to say that it's been extremely useful to listen to the questions and your responses, and we haven't even touched on all the major projects that are ongoing in your directorate, which you've kindly listed on the service plan for the year. And there are some really significant and major programs, and we've hardly touched on any of them. But I don't want anybody to think that they can now, because we've run out of time. So with that, unless you've got anything more to say, Councillor Anderson, I'd like to thank you very much, and the assistance provided by Ms. Broadstone and Kate Ryan as well. So thank you so much.
Chairman, I do have a couple of issues that I have. I did actually raise in my speech at the beginning. The first one is we have a paper coming up in the service plan about toilets, and as you're aware, when we looked at toilets in Bournemouth, we did a review on the toilets, and if your panel would like to get involved in that, I think that would be very helpful, particularly in the fact that we seem to have done a much better job on toilets in Bournemouth than we did than was done in Poole, and rather we didn't have the political issues and the issues in the public, and people were much more acceptance of what we did. So that would be one area that I'd very much appreciate some work from yourself on. The other is an area that I've been thinking about, is just looking at signs and street markings, and a process of how we look at improving them. Signs and these come under my portfolio. I have been talking to officers about maybe bringing getting some work done on these. So if you have any thoughts and ideas, I would appreciate them. I do have a couple of ideas that I think are big issues, and I think would raise all sorts of excitement in the town, but I'd rather not raise them because I think they are potentially, there's a potential commerciality sensitivity on them, so I'd rather not talk about them. And the hot issue really for me, and the bit that keeps me awake at night, is making sure that our refuse guys are safe. I mean, they do an amazing job in horrendous conditions, and I think we need to make sure we protect them. And I would just say that please think about the refuse guys, the work they're doing, and maybe if members of the public could give them a bit more latitude, and rather than abuse, I would appreciate that.
Thank you very much. I think we all recognise the difficult job that they have and how well they do perform it. They work exceedingly hard in all sorts of awful weather, and they get up at the crack of sparrows to do it. So,
Chairman, you've muted yourself, I'm afraid.
yeah, it's awful to think that people are being abusive to people that are doing such a good job on our behalf. It really is very regrettable to hear that. Anyway, thank you very much, Councillor Anderson. It's been a useful session, I think. I'd like to now move forward to item 6 on the agenda, which is the scrutiny of High Street strategy, which in itself is really about a paper that's just going to authorise, I think, a study on producing a strategy. But Councillor Broadhead is going to present this to us. So could I ask Councillor Broadhead, Deputy Leader of the Council and Portfolio Holder for Regeneration, Economy and Strategic Planning, to present this item? Thank you.
Yes, thank you very much, Chair. Nigel Brooks, who's the lead member that's been doing a big piece of work around retail strategy as well. So if it's all right with you, Chair, I'll do a bit of an introduction, hand over to Councillor Brooks, who has a few things to say as well. So I'll just do a very brief introduction, because you're right, and I'd go straight to the recommendation on this, which is quite unusual for an introduction, because the aim of this paper is not to land a big strategy on everyone, but it's to recognise that this is a big piece of work. This is going to be really important for our whole area, and that's why the recommendation is to work with partners to swiftly develop the strategy and the action plan, because as we found having the all-member seminar on this only a few weeks ago, we've got a wealth of experience even within the council network. Everyone's got really excellent ideas on what the future of our 17 different high streets, not just the 3, but the 17 different high streets can and should be in the future. And there's problems there, but also some massive opportunities. The paper itself sets out a little bit of the background as to why we're here. And I suppose the doom and gloom first comes under item 4, which gives some examples and some background of the real difficulties that high streets are facing, not just locally, but actually it's across the world at the moment, partly because of the pandemic. And you don't have to be a rocket scientist to go down any high street at the moment and see that a massive period of change is underway. And if we don't get ahead of this, we'll be very much left to pick up the pieces afterwards, or have very little control over that strategic direction in the future. So that's the bad bit, and it's nothing we don't know. I suppose from a slightly more optimistic point of view, I think in this area we are blessed with quite a lot of the natural ingredients, which means that I think rather than just weather this storm, this is one that we can not just bounce back from, but potentially use this as an opportunity to really fix the problem into the future, because this is not new news. The high street has been undergoing a period of change for some time. I think all that's happened is that the pandemic has accelerated the process. But in the report, item 6 highlights a report from the Centre of Cities, which, when it talks about Bournemouth, it means the BCP area. But actually, it's done quite a lot of work into the BCP area and how it actually rates in terms of how we should be able to deal with this. And our town centre economy is classified as strong. And if you compare that to such areas as Southampton, which is moderately strong, and Portsmouth, which is moderately weak, we're in quite a good place to start from to undertake this piece of work. And as I was going through records, actually, Chair, it is interesting to note that we've had some success in this area in the past, although actually sometimes probably not necessarily in the long-term direction that we would have actually wanted to set this up for the future. And I got some statistics recently from the Bournemouth Town Centre bid, and I know Councillor Brooks has some more stats to share with you later about what the level of footfall has been on the high street over the last few years alone. And just to give you an example, in 2016 there was a 12% increase in footfall in Bournemouth, taking Bournemouth as an example here because that's what we've got statistics for, on top of the previous year. The following year, 2017, there was a further 6% increase in footfall on the high street. 2018 had an 18% increase on the year before. It did start to fall away slightly in 2019, and 2020 I think we've just got to write off. But there has been some positive movement on the high street in the future, and that was evidenced by, again, another report that came from one of these national bodies that showed that our area had the biggest bounce back in footfall after the last lockdown. Now, the consequence of that as well is that we, by the same token, had the biggest fall back after the summer period. And I think a lot of that stems from the fact that a lot of the previous success we've had with a number of our high streets were already a destination, and we've had a lot of positive on the back of that destination. So I think a lot of the high street success in the past has been very much predicated on using the destination and the high street as an add-on. I think going forward, we've got a tremendous amount of work to do about getting our high streets into a position where they are destinations in and of themselves, rather than just an add-on to what we already have. So we need a plan. There's a number of different things that we are hoping to work on if this item goes through and we've got permission to really start to put some time and proper effort into this. First of all, the key cities group that we work with, we are now leading on a national piece of work in this area, the future of the urban and town centre high streets. And I think that's really important because I mentioned we're all in this boat together. Obviously, all the towns and cities are unique in their very different ways, but this is a problem that we can have some national solutions on. Slightly more locally, some ideas that we're working through with the team, should we get this underway, are to bottom out some design briefs for some areas. And the plan is to start with about 4 or 5 of them. So look at areas like Westover Road, for instance, get a design brief there, more of an alfresco dining, indoor-outdoor kind of restaurant zone. You can only really do that if you actually decide that that's it, that's how you want that area to be, for instance. Again, I think Pool Quay is another very good example where there's a lot of investment that wants to happen there and a lot of the natural ingredients, but there's some question marks over what can and can't happen there. And again, to take Christchurch as an example, we've got the former civics, the soon-to-be former civic centre, which could be a destination of itself, a marina or something like that. So picking a number of the areas and actually trying to bottom out what we would like them to be in the future. As you heard from the earlier Overview and Scrutiny Board meeting around the budget, we've got increased investment into this area, both in the Futures Fund, which is £50 million of money for us to spend as we see fit. We're putting money and time and effort into our regeneration plans and our planning function. And I'm hoping to bring a few papers in the next few months on the future of regeneration, the future of planning, because those quite often are a catalyst for how our high streets should be in the future. And then finally, just continue to be an easy place for innovation and improvement. And I'm having really good, strong meetings at the moment with people like the new owners of the Debenham site in Bournemouth, for instance, who have really exciting plans for the future. So actually, there is a lot of positivity, but we just need to actually try and unlock that positivity and then probably get out of the way. So there's a tremendous amount of work to do. This paper, as you've said, Chair, is just saying there is an issue here. We need to get ahead of this. We can't just wait. We need to try and be on the front foot. I'm really, really pleased to have Councillor Brooks on board as well, who has a wealth of experience in this area and already a number of ideas, in particular the direct intervention in empty unit strategy that he's looking to bring forward, and which we had our member seminar on as well, which I hope will be the very first piece of work. So that's my brief introduction. I'd be really pleased to hear from colleagues today about actually it'd be useful to have ideas for what people think should be in that strategy going forward. So because we are all in this together, but also happy to take any questions as well. But I'll pass over to Councillor Brooks. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Broadhead. Councillor Brooks?
Yes, thank you, Chair. And thank you for the members of this committee who were able to come to the workshop on the 19th of January. It was interesting. I had 9 very in-detailed responses from members, not only of this committee, but other members, on their ideas and their thoughts and observations on how we can start to revive our high streets. I said at that workshop, if we could come up with a book, 5 easy ways to revive your high street, we would all be millionaires. In fact, I think we would be famous across the world, because every high street throughout this land is faced with a hollowed out situation. I've some details on figures for you, which I'll give you in a moment. But when we do come out of lockdown, I think many of the retailers that we see who were trading will just not be there. We're on an escalating path, unfortunately, until we have clarity about the lockdown and how it will change. But let me give you some figures, and this is hot off the press, in terms of the void rates that we're carrying at the moment. And I'll start with Bournemouth, where we have in our core some 362 units. It's a very large sum. We have currently 63 vacant units, which is about 18% of the stock. Let's go to Christchurch. We have 197 units, and of those, 24 are currently vacant, and that's about 12.5%. In Boscombe, and I guess this is no surprise, we have some 150 units. 34 of those are vacant, which is about 22%, which is at the higher end of the towns. I'm still waiting for final figures for Poole, other than in what is the primary shopping area, there are 171 units. 12 of those are vacant at the moment, which is a 7% ratio. So it gives you some idea of what we're facing. And I think when we start to get the green lights on a lockdown being lifted, we'll start to see that there are opportunities to actually bounce back. And this, what I presented on the 19th of January, is only just one part of a bigger plan that has to be executed. And what could this plan be about? Well, I spent my career in managing shopping centres throughout the UK, asset management of shopping centres, with teams on the ground who are actually acting like bid managers. And the clear way we have to think about it is more about the whole of our town centres and our district centres. We shouldn't miss those out as well. But what I tabled on the 19th is, in a way, a kickstart to try and actually get both the confidence back in our town centres. There's a massive loss of employment. We know from Debenhams and Arcadia, 25,000 jobs have now been lost. Those are not going to be reopened. They've gone to Boohoo and they've gone to AOS. So we have a very difficult situation in how our high street is going to be occupied by businesses and retailers, which will attract our customers into them. What I set out on the 19th was what I called a retail first strategy. And I'll read them out to you because I think it was difficult going through on the 19th to take it all in at the time. So we need to help our high streets recover. And it may take 5 years, it could even be longer. It's that difficult. So we want to enable void space to be expediently reoccupied. We need to find and enable startups to take space. Often at this stage, many people are nervous that they won't be there more than a couple of months, and that doesn't give confidence to landlords with all the effort they'd have gone to in preparing leases, going through the legals, and then finding someone's going to have to walk away, either that they've gone bankrupt or into liquidation very quickly. We've got to help speeding up the process of enabling short-term property occupation. There will be a bounce back. I'm sure it would be a bit like Eat Out to Help Out, that the government enabled reducing costs to be to pass through to customers. So we've got to assist new businesses with their business plans. They may have bright ideas about their merchandising, but they may not necessarily understand the financial ramifications of taking a unit. There also needs to be the flexibility and eliminating barriers to occupation. We need to be fleet of foot, and that's why the headline is to have an arm's length company called Retail First. I've already discussed with some other councillors who are very skilled in property matters, who can actually give a guiding light to some of the things that we're going to have to do. We also need to be giving some innovation in what retail offers and opportunities can come forward to be able to test the market. Many of those may just not survive on a full rack rent that an agent says is the going rate for the premises. There's no longer a going rate for the premises because there's no evidence of lettings which substantiate rental values. So how do we go about this? And this was one of my slides again. We need to agree with landlords short-term tenancies to Retail First in respect of vacant high street units at nil cost, with full flexibility for landlords to terminate on short notice. Now, this is not just our ideas. It's actually being done elsewhere. And if you've actually seen a website appears here, which Mary Portas, who 10 years ago wrote a full report to government on how to get high streets back on their foot. It's already happening elsewhere. And in fact, 2 properties in Bournemouth are already listed on that website. But this actually arranges a situation where landlords are fully protected. They don't have the immediate exposure to the occupier. So how does this happen? Retail First grants tenancies at will, which is a form of short-term tenancy to validate that they are a start-up with the ability to trade, but also can be terminated at short notice. I suggested also, how can this actually work in terms of establishing the premises fit for purpose? Well, we have this wonderful arm's length company, Seascape South, which I'm a director of, to go and inspect, do preoccupation checks on health and safety and other matters to ensure the property is fit for purpose. And at the end, when that termination comes of this short-term let, that it's returned to landlords in fit and proper condition. But the hope is it's not going to require a termination, because the startup has started to find its feet. It's being able to realize that it can actually succeed. And that's when Retail First needs to step away and allow the superior landlord to take over and negotiate a lease. Where do we need some skills in Retail First? Well, I've suggested that there are many surveyors, graduate surveyors, who are looking for work at the moment. And we need someone who actually understands leases, can understand talking to landlords and their agents in their own language, so we can expedite the process of getting people into occupation. And then business startups need an immense help, be it in terms of understanding their business plan, legal, compliance, security, and marketing. All these things, if it was put inside directly BCP, would be a big drain on all the other ambitions and other projects in regeneration and revitalising our towns across the conurbation. So this was the nub of the proposal that I put to you on the 19th of January, and is embedded in this report and proposal to you today. It's not going to be easy. There are going to be problems, there are going to be difficulties, and there are going to be uncertainties. But I believe that as a council, and to demonstrate across the UK, we have to take leadership, and that's what the businesses are looking for. They're looking for leadership, that someone's actually going to try and make a difference. If we purely leave it to the market, I can assure you that we'll be in the same situation at least 12, 18 months. In terms of short-term occupations and actually generating new occupations, it's interesting that people like the NHS Confederation have already suggested that they will be prepared to take premises on our high streets where they can actually have drop-in for people who need to know more about their health service, or actually be directed where to find the best location for the service that they need. Also, other towns and cities and the councils are starting to take premises themselves so that they have a front. It's been part of the overall strategy of BCP to have hubs in our 3 towns, probably in libraries, but I would suggest this is an opportunity to actually put these kind of hubs in our high street where people are actually going to be more capable of accessing these services and also speaking to the right people. So there are a number of sort of opportunities that are coming forward which wouldn't have been there in 12, 18 months ago. There's so many voids, as I set out before, that we really need to think how they can be reoccupied with the best kind of services in the right sort of model, which gives confidence to landlords and gives confidence to new businesses that they won't actually have to go bankrupt or into liquidation because they can't make it pay. Their objective is to make it a longer term arrangement, and that's when Retail First has to step away and allow the landlord and their agent to agree terms for a proper commercial letting. Vacant shops are spreading at their fastest rate in 30 years. I read many things about landlords and landlords who own blocks of property, even shopping centres, where their loan arrangements are causing them to fail and they're handing back schemes. It is a desperate situation, but I believe as part of this overall strategy that's before you, we can start to make a difference, and I commend it to you.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Councillor Brooks. Yeah, fascinating, and I think it's great that we we're going to be proactive on this. You know how easy it is to be accused of sitting back and doing nothing, but here it's quite clear that we are going to try to address the issue as best we can and taking some innovative steps and hopefully ideas to move it forward. And I don't think anybody would disagree that it's a good idea to work up a strategy to address this issue. But having said that, members, can I open it up for debate? Thank you. Yes, Councillor Rice.
Thank you. Yes, I just wanted to highlight the issue of transportation and our high streets, which we did discuss with Councillor Brooks at the workshop that he did earlier. And to just re-emphasise the need to link transportation into this. I was just looking up about workplace parking levies. So Nottingham is the council that's introduced this, and they've made £64 million, which goes towards, well, the levy has made £64 million, which goes towards sustainable transport, which obviously is going to have a huge impact on how people access our high streets and whether they can or not and how frequently. And then it's also generated £430 million of external funding because it is innovative, it is looking at sustainable transport, it is helping people to move around in a healthy way. So I just wanted to re-emphasize the fact that we need to do something about parking and transport in order to help our high streets. And I would love to see that as part of this piece of work.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I remember your note, Councillor Rice. It certainly mapped out all these things. I think one of the problems is we're having to fight hard against out-of-town retailing. A lot of the comments say that what is going to survive will be industrial estates and out-of-town retailing. Why industrial estates? Because there will be vast areas where there will be stock stored and you'll be able to go and collect, and you therefore do not have any need to go into the town centre, a bit like home delivery but in reverse. So I think whilst car parking and access to town centres is key, I think there are issues about what has been baked into the finances of BCP as to its expectation of its return from its car parking. Maybe there are retailers, they have a spot sale. If you don't go online and buy by 9 o'clock tonight, you lose the opportunity. Maybe there are just sort of punctures to put into a couple of days around key times to actually get people in and attract them. There's a whole mix of things we can do, and I think these things are going to come through in the retail strategy.
Thank you very much, Councillor Brooks. Councillor Broadhead and then Councillor Borthwick, please.
Yeah, no, just to respond quickly, I completely agree with Councillor Rice. It's a massive part of the success of the strategy going forward, making sure that people can get around and want to do so, and it's an enjoyable experience as well. I think one of the things that really struck me when I took the paper through Cabinet and full council recently on the changes to the parking for residential properties and things recently was that in our urban areas, so Bournemouth and actually I found out subsequently Boscombe, around half the people there do not own or have access to a car. So actually a lot of people that live in these urban centres already don't have a car. And actually, as we try and as more people will be living in the urban centres, I'm sure that will increase. And really interestingly, I had a report today that's been a PR company's done a lot of work with young people, really young people, but younger people in our area, asking them about their views of the economy and things. And a number of them said that what they liked about the area is how easy it is to get around. So we do have quite a good record of that, room for improvement. At the same time, the one thing I would have to say is that half the emails I get are about this, the other half the emails are from the other side saying the reason I don't visit the town centre anymore is because it's not very easy to park. So we have to look at helping as many people as possible, particularly as a destination, but it should be central to the strategy.
Thank you, Councillor Broadhead. Councillor Borthwick.
Yes, Chair. Talking about charity shops, I dropped out as mayor. When I came from being mayor, we had a charity shop in the Boscombe Centre, which was doing less than £1,600 a week. I and 3 others joined up together. We're now taking £1,800 a week because we do our charity shop as a class. There's nothing rubbish in there. Everything's absolutely clean and tidy, and we're very lucky to have an excellent frontage within the centre itself. So the shop all looks clean. So we're one of the successes which have gone from nothing in these times up to £1,800 a week, looking to increase trade even further. And of course, it all goes to charity. So there is opportunities out there.
Yes,
Thank
Chair, I think...
Thank you. Just a minute, Councillor Brooks, please. We need to just put this back through Councillor Broadhead if he wants to reply. No, okay, Councillor Brooks, thank you.
Yes, charity shops play a key part of recoveries. I lived in North Hertfordshire, a place called Hitchin, which has probably one of the best bid arrangements and was one of the innovators from moving to town centre management to bid arrangements. And the town was more or less the charity shop capital of the world at the time in the 80s. What happened shortly after that was the economy recovered, and charity shops found that they could not pay the rents that the landlords were seeking. And very quickly, the whole character of the town changed, more to hospitality, to cafes, to bars, to restaurants, and it is an exceptionally buzzing location that it attracts many people from surrounding towns because they know that there is the culture of eating, socializing, being part of a community, and enjoying that particular experience. Some of that may come back in our towns. It's a tall order, I know, but I think it may actually come back. In terms of charity shops themselves, I think there's a movement at the moment of new to you. It's not necessarily saying I'm buying something because it came from a charity shop. It's the concept of having it new to you. And I think that's very powerful, and we'll see more of that as well.
Thank you very much, Councillor Brooks. Councillor Slade.
I'll try that, Lou Abbott. Thanks for that. Thanks very much indeed. Sorry, Chair.
Okay, I forgive you. It's your birthday. Councillor Slade.
Thank you, Chair. I love charity shops. I think that whilst as a trader they're a nightmare because you feel like it's unfair competition, I do think if we can brand them better, they are a really good way of people accessing, local high streets and having a mooch about. So I think they are often the butt of jokes, and they shouldn't be because they're wonderful places. I've got a couple of questions and queries, and is there any particular reason why Councillor Brooks's report wasn't appended to this? Because it feels like a missed opportunity. Councillor Brooks has taken us through it in a public meeting, and it would have been nice to actually have that for us to look at properly and for the public to understand the ideas behind it. So I'm just wondering if there's a reason that it wasn't appended. The second thing that I want to speak about is district centres. I used to be the chair of the Broadstone Chamber of Trade and have been traded on that high street for nearly 14 years. So I've got quite a lot of experience in how districts are very, very different to town centres. And in the whole report, the word district is mentioned 8 times. Half the time it's mentioned in the phrase business improvement districts, and in the other half it's at the end of a sentence that says town centres and districts. Nowhere in the report is there a recognition or a discussion or an acknowledgement that districts are different. And I would have liked to see in the report an area that actually recognised that the way people interact with a district is very different. I will go into my district if I want to go and buy a birthday card, but if I'm going to go and buy a month's worth of birthday cards, I might take the bus into Poole and you have a mooch around the Dolphin Centre and whatever. So I think there was a missed opportunity there. And when the retail strategy comes forward, I just wonder if you could tell me how much effort is going to go into differentiating between our districts and our towns. And the final question, again, it's a bit of a pitch for, it's not just about bids, bids get mentioned, but there's no mention of traders associations and other groups that represent businesses in some of the smaller spaces. You know, Ashley Cross, Ashley Road, Broadstone, they don't have access to a bid. I don't see anything in here about working with those groups to see whether it's worth exploring a bid or whether there are other means through which we can support businesses to help each other. So I just wonder if we can have some thought on that, please.
Thank you, Councillor Broadhead. Of course, we're mindful that this paper is about agreeing to formulate a strategy, and we're already, I think, into the grounds of actually formulating a strategy. But nevertheless, Councillor Broadhead.
Yes, I've got no problem with that. I love good ideas, and we'll take them from wherever they come from, Chair. The first question, which is a valid question, which is why aren't we chucking loads into this, in particular the retail first strategy that we had at the beginning? And I'll be honest, Councillor Slade, we thought about this, and actually part of the reason that this paper is like it is because we're currently, as I mentioned in my opening, working on a number of different areas which are all related to the high street. And Councillor Brooks and I spoke about it, and it seemed a bit backwards to come forward with a strategy for direct intervention and a strategy for design, but it is all under the umbrella of the fact that, the future of our high streets. And also, I think there is a bit of a statement of intent, as the Chair said earlier on, about signifying that we mean business on this. And actually, this is going to be an ongoing and a more encompassing work stream going forward. So member seminars are a great way, I think, for us to tease some of these issues that we're looking at, to launch ideas. And, this retail first strategy is very much has been driven forward by Councillor Brooks. What will then happen, as with lots of the other different strategies that we're working on and parts of under this strategy, is that we can have it under the umbrella of this and then get them into action quickly. So my thinking is that rather than me come before overview and scrutiny and full council and cabinet with every single constituent part of this strategy going forward, we'll continue to engage, we'll continue to have member workshop and member seminars, but actually we've now got permission to get on and actually start doing it at pace. So that's the reason why, and I hope that makes sense. I'll briefly deal with the two other points. Districts are different, absolutely, completely. I referenced at the beginning, we've got 17 different high streets, and I call them high streets across the Bournemouth, Christchurch and Poole area. And we'll need different ways to deal with different strategies to deal with different parts of the high streets, not least because we've got some absolutely cracking success stories across our area of areas that are already bucking the trend and doing fantastic. And it's because they're different. So again, the reason it's not in there is because this isn't the strategy per se. This is just a bit of background, but I absolutely completely agree. And I also completely agree about the point of bids. Bids are there, they're formal partners that do get stuff done. Of course, we've got to work with, but we want to work with as many people as possible to try and take this forward. And again, a lot of work is going on with a number of those districts or high streets about whether they want to either get involved in current bids, set up their own new bids, etc., etc. So lots to work on, which is precisely the reason why I thought better to have an umbrella, get on with the strategy and press through with it. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for that. I'm very happy. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Millie Earl, and then after that will be Councillor Leslie Dedman. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Chair. I'm really pleased. I'm really glad this paper's here. I think kicking off the strategy to specifically tackle our high streets is really good. And I'm glad that in response to Councillor Slade's question, we talked a lot about districts, because that's also something that's very important to me, representing Ashley Road in my area. I do have one comment and then one other question. So the comment is that in paragraph 6, I mean, it's a bit, niggly. It reads Centre for Cities. In Centre for Cities terms, Bournemouth broadly refers to Bournemouth, Christchurch and Poole collectively. So I'm sure you'll agree that Poole and Christchurch are distinct towns with our own potential, and referring to them as Bournemouth, even if it's just for ease, isn't really appropriate, and it doesn't really respect our town's heritage and our residents and our populations, which are really, really diverse. So even though it might just be a niggly point, when I read that, I'm sort of wince a little bit, and I'm sure a lot of residents do as well. So if we could keep them separate, or at least refer to them separately as one, I'd feel much more comfortable with that. I also, just going back to your response, Councillor Broadhead, on the district areas, obviously we've got the High Streets Task Force, the retail strategy itself, the vacant unit plan. Just to get a bit more of an answer, will all districts also be involved in that, or will it be very separate, as in those are for the town centres, but then the districts have a different plan or separate plans? I mean, it would just be really good to get a view of how the strategy will approach those district areas, rather than the high streets in terms of Bournemouth, Poole and Christchurch High Street. Does that make sense, just to ask to elaborate on that a little bit more?
Councillor Broadhead?
Yeah, I'll start, and then I'll let Councillor Brooks come in to finish, because I'm sure he's got even more experience than, in fact, even more experience than I have. It sounds terrible, but he's vastly more experience than I have in this area. Your first point, Councillor Earl, I completely agree. You know, it's just I did highlight it in my opening, not my words. For whatever reason, the centre of cities, which actually do a tremendous amount of good work, really, really interesting analytic work, have decided that they call us as a collective area of Bournemouth. And I think the reason that's been brought out in the report is to highlight, when they talk about Bournemouth, it means all of us, rather than just Bournemouth, rather than us taking on their nomenclature and badging it as Bournemouth. But I know their fault, not mine. But it is interesting because they do a lot of work, and it is always interesting to know that when you read Bournemouth in that, it doesn't just mean Bournemouth Town Centre, it means our whole collective area. So, but point taken, and I'll send them an angry letter to try and get them to correct it. The second point, which is how do we approach our district areas? Is it going to be different? Good question. I think that will be part of the strategy to look into. I'm sure that there are parts of it, for instance, the retail first strategy, that will be cross high streets. But it might well be that we need to have some, slightly more direct views on how to enable districts, because I think that enable word is really important. I'm not in the mood for going in there and telling people what to do. It's just unlocking the potential that they clearly already have, because we've got a number of success stories. But I'll defer to Councillor Brooks for his views on this one.
Thank you. Thank you, Councillor Millie. There's some interesting points there. District centres, they have a sort of a subset challenge in their own. But the upside, first of all, is that with people working from home and staying more local, I think there is an opportunity for them to bounce back a lot easier. Over here in Highcliffe, we have a district centre. There are 124 units. That's sort of legacy terms. There's far too many of them. And we've seen over the recent past, dry cleaners, fashion store, others just disappear and being replaced by more service businesses, because people will go to the supermarkets, they'll go elsewhere for the kind of things that they would have otherwise found in the district centre. But district centres like Southbourne, which was highlighted when it was part of the possibility of coming out of COVID, a lot of local businesses had identified with the characteristics of the catchment, and the catchment were very prepared to support a lot of independent retailers, and that's a success story in itself. And we just hope that they bounce back when they can properly open. Other district centres have their own unique problems, and I think it needs those locations to be understood. In some respects, it may mean a contraction of the retail centre, and it'll be interesting to see what the local plans say after the Litchfield's research, which is underway, I understand, at the moment, on all the retail across the whole conurbation, that some of these district centres will just have to contract in terms of retail units, and they will be eventually replaced by housing or other uses. So they need to be looked individually, and I don't think there's one answer for each. They have to be looked at in a little more detail, and I think that's going to be part of the exercise we're going to go into as well.
Thank you, Councillor Brooks. Okay, yes, Councillor Earl.
Thank you. Thank you for that response. I agree, like they're really complicated. And whenever I hear the phrase like out of area or out of town shopping centre, I always think, well, that's what we are on Ashley Road. We are an out of town shopping centre. We don't, you know, we have people who use the businesses locally rather than getting on a bus into town, like Councillor Slade said. So it's always a bit of a, I don't want those people to go to poor. I want them to provide jobs and services and everything else that comes with a really good retail structure in my area. Just on that though, I think just looking at the recommendation, so it's Cabinet delegates authority to the Director of Development in consultation with the portfolio holder for economy and strategic planning to work with partners to swiftly develop a strategy and action plan enabling the delivery interventions that will support our high streets. So I like that recommendation, but what I would really like is to kind of ensure that member involvement of those district areas is in it. And like you said, we've got 17 across the area, and it's not all about our high street. So I was wondering if we could include and ward councillors after partners so that they are very much involved in that retail strategy and action plan for the district areas in particular, and for those who are on the town centre high streets as well. Can I put that as a recommendation, Chair?
Can we just have a response from Councillor Broadhead first, because he'll be able to satisfy you without you having to do that.
Yeah, she's probably not going to be surprised to hear that I don't think that's a terrible idea at all. I think it's a very good idea. I mean, essentially, we've already, as the administration, tried to just embed the process automatically that ward councillors are involved as much as possible in these things. But it's interesting she says it, because when I was preparing for tonight and just rereading the report, I couldn't help but notice that in my own report, when it talks about wards under the areas that have been referred to, it talks about Bournemouth Central, Christchurch Town and Poole Town, and of course, as we've explored, it goes much deeper for that. So I'm absolutely happy to accept that and work that in, because I think it's absolutely inevitable that we want to include the experience of ward members as well. I'd suggest respectfully it's a given, but if you don't believe me, I'm quite happy to put that in writing.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Broadhead. Well, Councillor Earl, if you could just, whilst we're moving on to the other speakers, if you could just quickly look at the recommendation, see how you would like it changed, and we can make a recommendation from the board, so we can just get it. Okay, so if you'd just like to think, I'll come back to you in a minute, but I'd like to move on to Councillor Leslie Dedman, please.
Yes, thanks, Chairman. I must say, when I first came down here, we had a business in Ashley Road, Councillor Earl, and for a long time I thought Ashley Road was in fact Poole. So I share your feelings about it. I was much surprised to find that Poole was even bigger. But
I was born there, Councillor Devon, on Ashley Road.
Oh, well, here's a shout out for Ashley Road. No, I wanted to say, though, thank you very much, both the councillors who presented this. And I think that it's obvious that high streets are going to be really, really different in the future. And there's going to be variety, there are going to be more residents. And in fact, when I saw this report, I looked back at one that Christchurch Borough did. I must say 2003, I wasn't actually on the council at that point. And it's got so many good ideas, and I hope those will come in. I'm sure I shall send them in to somebody. For example, alcohol-free zones and all sorts of things that Christchurch wanted and never got. But one of the things is, I think this might be for Councillor Brooks really, that there's a mention of the R3 group. And it also says they're working with the Health and Wellbeing Board. And I would very much like to push one of my favourite topics, which is the dementia-friendly town. We're doing that in Christchurch. And I'd like you to take on board, working with the Health and Wellbeing Board, that this dementia-friendly things will come through, because it's really important as the shoppers get older, or the town users get older, that I think that we need to have a lot of dementia-friendly things about us in the town. So really, that was all I wanted to say. Thank you very much. I thought it was a good report. I should be interested to see how it goes. So thank you. And as I say, I'd like you to take on board about the dementia-friendly aspect.
Thank you, Councillor Dedman. Did you want to come back on that, Councillor Broadhead, or is that taken as read?
I hope Councillor Brooks won't take it personally that it's the dimension friendly bit has been directed in his direction, but I'm assuming that's because he knows and I do.
Yes, sorry, I was laughing, but I didn't mean it, Nigel, but we're older over here than they are in Bournemouth, maybe. Thank you, Philip.
Chair, I could not possibly comment on my position. Can I just say thank you, Councillor Leslie Dedman. Yes, it has been a great initiative to make sure that we have inclusivity amongst people. I think, you know, it spills out into other areas about having wide enough pavements that there are no trip hazards. It goes to A-boards, which retailers love to put out, which are very difficult for people who have poor sight, and also contribute to trip hazards. There are a number of sort of nuances that when you stand back and think about the wider public and their needs, you then realise that there are things that can be done with small modifications which can actually really make a difference for people. And I think when someone who goes into a shop and actually has to have customer service, it becomes preeminent that they realise the needs of that particular person. And I think that's what dementia care has all been about. Just to say on R3, I sit on that group and I listen intently to the hospitality sector and the retailers and the hoteliers to really understand what they're going through. Much of it's the immediacy, the problems, where we're going to get out of it. I sincerely do hope that we have Eat Out to help out come back. I sincerely hope that the rates suspension, business rates, will be extended beyond the end of March so that we can actually put back more capability into these businesses to recover. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Brooke. Having reached a significant birthday not all that long ago, it would appear that I have to move to Christchurch. Maybe I'll fit in rather well there by the sound of it. So, we've got Councillor Jackie Edwards now, and I think this will be the last speaker on this particular subject. So, Councillor Edwards, would you like to come in? Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Just a quick comment and then a question, if that's okay. Our high streets also include other places, such as, well, certainly Bournemouth's got a number of nightclubs in the high street. And we've had quite a large number of bank closures. So I'm just wondering if Councillor Brooks is including these in his units that are empty. But also, although he mentioned the numbers of units, some are quite small units, but then we've got some very big empty units. What are we going to do with the likes of TJ Hughes in Boscombe, Beals in Bournemouth? Are we going to break them up into smaller units and use perhaps top floors for accommodation? Because I'm not sure that you'll find any large retailer easily to take over those sites. So that was my question. Thank you.
And a very good question it is, Councillor Edwards. Who would like to answer that, Councillor Broadhead or Councillor Brooks?
I'll take the second one, if I may, Chair, and Nigel can take the first one. The second one's a really interesting point, and I think one of the things that I found certainly over the last few months as we've been talking to a number of these quite often the property owners that own these big stores like your TJ Hughes or your Beals or your M&S, etc., is not to make assumptions. So I think that it's easy to go, well, actually the future of that kind of larger premises is dead, therefore we need to immediately storm one in there and break them up. And I've been really surprised by some of the conversations I've had with, for instance, the owners of the Debenhams building, like I said, the owners of Beals, the Marks and Spencer's site in Bournemouth, and others, to name a few, that the private sector is already quite advanced in coming up with plans for what they want to do. And it's not always just get rid of it and put loads of flats there. So again, it'd be interesting to see what comes out. And that's why, as I said at the beginning, I'm keen for a number of these areas to get some design briefs in and work with them so that we can try and enable that to move forward. And particularly with the Boscombe one, Councillor Edwards may know that we've got advanced plans in the what is called the Bournemouth Town Fund, although it's around Boscombe, which does deal with that area in particular and completely reimagine the Boscombe High Street. And touch wood, we're feeling quite confident that we may well get a positive answer from government on that. It's £26 million, so that will enable quite a transformative approach in Boscombe. But yeah, I've been very surprised that rather than these big empty units going to be sat there like massive empty monoliths of failure into the future, the amount of plans that are already coming to fruition on them is really surprising and very, very optimistic. And as I said at the beginning, back to that natural ingredients point, we're an area that people want to invest in. So what we want to do is enable that and try and make that happen. But I'll let Councillor Brooks come in on your other point. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you for the question, Councillor Jackie Edwards. I think investment in bricks and mortar, in town centres and retail is going to be turned on its head. The big institutions are suffering enormously who have invested in property. They can't claim rent, there are rent holidays. They're seeing their occupants go into receivership and liquidation. And the bigger units do present one of the biggest challenges, how to actually restore it. Rental values that they have received have just now disappeared. So they have to be creative. And I think some of that will actually have to go to a redevelopment. So I'm sure we'll see some freehold owners, landlords come forward with redevelopment plans. I think in the short term, maybe the front sections of stores will actually be used. They'll be shuttered off at the back because there's no reason to try and trade out of a 3,000 square unit when you can actually do it out of 1,000 square feet. That will be an interim arrangement. But in the longer term, I think, as Councillor Broadhead saying, there will be innovation like at Boscombe with a redevelopment coming forward. And I think that's going to be a great opportunity because it will introduce new mix of retailers and businesses and probably residential as well.
Thank you, Councillor Brooks. Councillor Edwards, your hand has gone down now, I think.
Yes, sorry.
Councillor...
Could I just add, though, that I think hopefully exciting news that, and I'm glad to hear that there are people interested. And I also think that some of these retailers really need to rethink the hours that they open for the people that are shopping. It's no good shutting at 5:30 if people that work in the town centre finish work at 5:30. So I think they've got to take a little bit of interest in who's coming in and shopping in those shops and perhaps refigure their opening hours.
Thank you, Councillor Edwards. Councillor Slade?
Sorry, I was going to ask for a recommendation, and I'm just wondering whether whether I've got enough assurance from Councillor Broadhead and Councillor Brooks about whether it's necessary, because my original approach was that under the previous administration there was an attempt to start a sort of a member group, not an ONS working group, but very much a sort of cabinet member group.
Councillor Slade, you're muted.
Oh,
you've gone muted.
Oh, sorry about that. I'm talking to myself. So I was just saying the previous administration had a plan for a group of members to work with the portfolio holder on districts, and didn't happen for reasons that, finance and lack of staff. Now there's going to be quite a significant investment in regen. And with the addition of the lead member, I'm wondering whether it's practical for Councillor Brooks to lead a district advisory group to actually sort of have a much closer relationship in getting down and dirty with those district areas, as we had hoped to do. But now the capacity is there. And I didn't know whether that was something we could get a commitment for, whether it was needed as a recommendation, or whether I'm going to hear some really like, yes, let's do it. Where do we sign?
Councillor Broadhead.
Yes, no, I completely agree with Councillor Slade and with Councillor Millie Earl earlier about the importance of districts, as we're now calling them going forward, but also the importance of ward member engagement. I'm a little bit less keen on setting up advisory groups here, there and everywhere, because my experience tends to tell me that they become more bureaucratic than actually getting on and dealing with it. So I can certainly give board members the commitment that from my side, and I've let Nigel Brooks come in, that this is an ongoing piece of work. This isn't I'm going to be coming back with a final strategy at the next board meeting. There it is, job done. This is really a commitment that this is going to be a massive priority going forward, with a number of different streams that are going to come through. So I think just singling one out might well restrict us, but I can give the very clear political commitment that we ain't going to be doing this by ourselves. We're going to need to involve people along the journey.
Could I just come in? Councillor Earl has actually made a recommendation that ward councillors be included in the recommendation. Does this go anywhere to meeting your requirements there, Councillor Slade?
I think it does, and I'm going to take Councillor Broadhead on his word, because he usually can be held to it. And if not, then we'll see how it comes back.
Okay, thank you. So is there anybody wishing to second Councillor Earl's proposal or move to alter the recommendation on the paper?
I'm happy to second it if it's needed, unless Councillor Broadhead was happy just to add it anyway and adopt it without the need for a recommendation.
Okay, I think, as we're reviewing it, it is something that's coming from the ONS meeting. We will just have a quick round. Is everybody content with the change to the recommendation that will now include with ward councillors included? If there's any dissent from that, we'll take it as agreed. Okay, there's no dissent from that, so we'll say that's agreed, and we will put that forward as the formal recommendation to Cabinet. Councillor Brooks, I think you wanted to come back, but if you could be brief, please, because we need to move on to the local plan, to the forward plan. Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I think there are lots of things that are going to tear out of the overall strategy on the town centres. Over here in Highcliffe, we have already completed a project called Revitalise the High Street, looking at traffic engineering, which now sits with the portfolio holder. We also, and this is through the parish council, have engaged a public relations officer where that person is actually tasked with actually going and looking and finding individual retailers, rather than just say, here we are, come and find us. Do actually come specifically, because your particular retail line, your merchandise will fit very well. So I think, as I say, there are things which will tear out of this, which will help significantly the district centres. But there's a lot of hard work that the ward members are going to have to put in. There's sort of, a clear path here I've seen, that you will have to actually, really get engaged in some things which will actually just sort of stretch the things that you're doing already. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Brooks. Okay, an interesting discussion. We really look forward to the strategy coming forward, which I note in the paper says at speed. So we'll see you next month, and let's hope all the ward councillors can give you the support that they say they want to put into it. So I'd like to move on now then, please, to the forward plan. It's presented in the reports pack. I just really would like to take any comments if anybody has comments on the forward plan. Thank you. Councillor Slade.
Thank you, Chair. Presumably, now that the portfolio holder decision around Keyhole Bridge has been called in by at least 3 members of ONS, we need to add that to the forward plan. Will that automatically go on in March, or does that have to fit in somewhere with the schedule, please, as it's the first time we've done this?
I've not yet formally been notified of the outcome of the call-in process. When I do, as the chair, then I'll decide when it goes onto the agenda. So at the moment, I'm unsighted on that, but I am aware there's some work going on in the background. So I just need to be formally told what the outcome of that is, and then we'll consider when we can put it on the but I would suggest it's likely to go on to the next meeting if it does come through.
Could we ask the monitoring officer for clarification around what she would expect her timetable to be? I'm assuming that papers and etc. would have to be published in line with the normal processes. As I say, it's the first time, so it'd be useful if she could update us if she's still with us.
Ms. Sice, are you there?
Yes, thank you, Chair. I am still here. The process is that once the call-in period has expired, which is the deadline is the 4th of February. So on that day, Chair, I will formally notify you because various emails are still coming in to us and further grounds and so on may be raised. So I can't give a final view on call-in just at the moment. And the Constitution provides that it should go to the next available meeting. Now, whether that's the next scheduled meeting or whether Overview and Scrutiny Board would like to call an additional meeting, that's entirely up to you and the committee chairman.
Thank you very much. Is that clarified that for you, Councillor Slade?
Thank you for the clarification, because we, as Overview and Scrutiny Board members, we've all been getting lots of emails from residents, so it's good to be able to update them.
Okay, thank you. In that case, there's nothing I wish to add to the forward plan unless anyone else does, so I'd like to move on to the next item.
Sorry, Councillor Bartlett.
Sorry.
Sorry, I put my camera back on. I thought during this item we were going to clarify how we wanted to deal with the trees and roads issues that Councillor Trent had brought up.
Yeah, I've moved on because we're running out of time, but essentially they remain on the agenda. Okay. And they will be dealt with separately. The other issue that to take into account is what is proposed in the all-member seminar on those particular items as well. So we, I really need to do a little bit more work on that before. Okay, but they remain on the agenda.
Thank you.
Okay, so what have we got next? Local plan working group update. Yes. You've seen the report attached to the pack. In principle, we held a meeting with the volunteers, and it was agreed that we would like to move forward, subject to the board's approval. So we really just need to get formal approval that you wish to go ahead. One thing I was to say, there was a lot of very strong support from officers that we do get engaged in this process. I preliminary set a meeting, the first meeting, subject to your agreement. I think it's for the 17th of February, at which we will elect a chair and a vice chair and to take the thing forward. If anybody would like to ask any further questions about it, I think that's all we really need to do is to seek your formal agreement that we can move forward with this piece of work. So if anybody has got any questions to raise or any dissent from the idea that we do take it forward, then could you speak now, please? Thank you. No, it does appear that we have agreement. Thank you for that. Just moving forward to agenda item 9, future meeting dates. Just one thing I have to raise. Apparently the 3rd of January 2022 is a bank holiday. 4th of January is not an option. Wednesday the 5th of January is a possibility. I've been asked to confirm if this is acceptable to the board. It seems a long way away, doesn't it? Okay, we've got no dissent from that, so I'll accept that that's the date at the moment. All right, members. Thank you. It's been a very long day again, and some very interesting things as usual. Some interesting debate. I'm sure we all want to get away, so I'd just like to thank all of the officers and democratic staff, services support for their work today and this evening. And I'd like to now close the meeting. So thank you very much, members.